Meeting will return to order. Good evening. It's Tuesday, December 15th. This is a regular City Council meeting. We have completed an executive session and a reception for our outgoing council member. We move now to two items of special business. The first is swearing in of Councilmember Tom Acker. And come on up, Allie.
We're all boycotting this now.
Okay, now I'm on. Okay. So we officially swore in Mr. Thomas Acker on November 28th when the election was certified with King County Elections. But tonight we are doing it here in front of all of you, in front of everyone that's watching at home and online. Do you have any family here tonight that you'd like to have come up?
I do. Yeah, come on up, guys. I gotta help them now.
That's okay, yeah. Yeah, come on up here.
You only have to do it once, get up there.
Come on up.
This is James.
Hi, James.
This is Wyatt.
Hi, Wyatt.
Here comes William.
Here comes, oh my goodness. These are not all of your children, correct?
They are.
All of them. Oh my goodness. All right.
They actually all worked on the campaign.
Oh, great.
Wait, William,
Is this everybody?
It is.
Okay. All right. So, Tom, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I'm going to let you hold the microphone.
Okay. Oh.
Right hand up. Just repeat after me.
I, Thomas Acker,
Having been duly elected
having been duly elected
to the office of City of Mercer Island,
to the office of City of Mercer Island,
Council Position Number 4,
Council Position Number 4,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of this office
of this
as
office
prescribed by law
as prescribed by law
and to the best of my ability,
and to the best of my ability,
and that I will support and maintain
and that I will support and maintain
the Constitution of the State of Washington
the Constitution of the State of Washington
and of the United States of America.
and of the United States of America.
Congratulations. Welcome.
Thank you, Allie.
Taking a picture with everyone.
Laura, do you have your camera? Jim? Where's Jim? Oh, there he is.
All right, you guys got to squish together.
Push in, guys. William,
I'm sure you have no problem squishing.
push him over here, guys. Put you up in front.
All right.
All right.
Everyone say, Tom's got late nights now. Okay, one more. Awesome.
Get in here. Nice faces. One more.
1, 2, 3, smile.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming tonight,
Be right there, Bruce.
Yep.
If you guys are going to get me sick, I don't know.
Okay.
Everybody's coughing.
So the second item of business, we've just brought one in. Now it's time to send one out. We have obviously had this reception for Dan, but we also have a moment of recognition here within the council meeting. We have a resolution which I will read. It is, in light of 18 years worth of service, lengthy. So bear with me as I read. Resolution of acknowledgement and commendation for Dan Grouse's service to the citizens of Mercer Island. Whereas Dan Grouse has served the citizens of Mercer Island with distinction in public office as a member of the Mercer Island City Council since January 2000, specifically as a council member from 2000 to 2011, as deputy mayor from 2012 to 2015, and again as council member from 2016 to present. During Dan's 4.5 terms in office, the City Council has met 494 times, adopted 325 ordinances and 292 resolutions, and reviewed over 2,000 agenda bills on a wide variety of subjects. Over the course of the past 18 years, the Council has accomplished much. Dan's been influential on every issue the Council faced. On many issues, he was not just influential, but instrumental in reaching the final result. These are a few highlights from his tenure on the Council. Parks and open space. Luther Burbank Park acquisition and funding. Significantly increased funding for Pioneer Park. Voter approval for parks operating levies. Maintaining vegetation management funding for parks and open space. Key public facilities. Mercer Island Community and Event Center construction. Peak project agreement with neighbors and city funding. Mercer Island Center for the Arts, MOU. 2004 and 2017 agreements relating to I-90 Center roadway conversion to light rail and mitigation. Financial matters. Withdrawal of city from Cascade Water Alliance and entry into long-term water supply contract with City of Seattle. Significant cost reductions, revenue gains, including reduced scope of sewer lakeline project, changing Southeast 40th 86th Avenue intersection project, eliminating criminal justice fund to free up resources, instituting ambulance service by fire department, saving cost of transporting fill by instead creating Grouse Mountain, also known as Kite Hill. Safety, public safety, South End Fire Station construction and financing, fire equipment reserve fund creation and supplemental funding, creation of new emergency operations center, emergency water supply project, recreational and other facility improvements, East, West, and North Mercer Way bike and pedestrian shoulders, funding for South Mercer playfield turf projects, turf field reserve policy to ensure funding available for turf replacement, pedestrian shoulders on a portion of Southeast 72nd on First Hill, land use and development issues, residential development code rewrite, including significant tree and neighborhood protections, town center development code amendments, 3 different sets of changes, adoption of development impact fees, and finally the category of community services, increased financial support for arts programs, city startup funding for the Mercer Island Farmers Market, Arts Council funding for Youth Theater Northwest, regular updates to Islanders on city issues. You know, and in reading that list, it was a lengthy list. I'm ad-libbing now. That's a lengthy list, but many of those things were very impactful to our community, and Dan was in the center of every one of those. So, all right, onward, page 2, and there are only 2 pages. Dan has served as a city council liaison for every city board and commission but one, the utility board, spending 4 years each on the Design Commission and Open Space Conservancy Trust. Notably, he was member and or chair of the City Council Parks and Recreation Subcommittee for 10 of his 18 years on the council. More recently, he has focused regionally, serving on the Sound Cities Association's Public Issues Committee, the King County Regional Policy Committee, the King County Consortium Joint Recommendations Committee, and the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency Advisory Committee. Dan will be remembered most for the impressive political skills he brought to bear in his tireless advocacy for maintaining and advancing Mercer Island's quality of life. His eloquence, his persuasiveness, his unmatched ability to quickly synthesize and capture thoughts in writing. These skills have set Dan apart. And in coupling these skills with a willingness to dive deeply into the issues, to question assumptions, to seek creative solutions, to willingly devote long hours to the task, Dan has served Mercer Island well and truly. With his newfound freedom, Dan is sure to enjoy more time at his vacation home in the San Juans, working to preserve regional lands with Forterra, traveling with his wife, and visiting his children and grandson. Although we do have a strong suspicion we will continue to hear from him on a regular basis. Be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Mercer Island, on behalf of its citizens, the City Council commends Dan Grouse for his long-tenured and distinguished public service and extends its sincerest thanks and appreciation for his time and many significant contributions to Mercer Island over the past 18 years. Approved this 5th day of December, 2017. So with that, we have a copy of this in leather bound for you, sir. Give you that. And as well, we have a hunk of glass for you. And I'll let you pull that out and show that to the crowd.
It reads, Dan Grouse, in appreciation of 18 years of exceptional service in Mercer Island community. Mercer Island City Council 2000-2017. Thank you very much.
Now, Dan, the staff, I have to add, the staff made me take it out. But there was another line in this resolution, which I'm going to share with you, even though they took it out. And that line read, Dan, you will surely be missed from the council, but perhaps not so much from being the de facto city attorney, city road engineer, city code writer, city arborist, and the list goes on. So with that, I'll be the first. Perhaps other council members want to add something, but I certainly want to say my heartfelt thanks to you. And it's been a challenge, but a pleasure to work with you over these years. And certainly I've learned a tremendous amount, and seeing you make change happen, which is really the thing that I've most been impressed by, is your ability to work through issues, complex issues, spend inordinate amounts of time to really understand them to a depth that no one else has gone to, and to make change happen. And I'll just point back to it. I wrote the line along with some of the others about the focus always being on maintaining and advancing Mercer Island's quality of life. And I really do believe that that's been the focus that you've kept in mind in everything that you've done, and I think that's tremendously admirable. So, yeah, thank you. All right, others, council members. Anyone? Benson.
I'm sure everybody's going to weigh in a little bit here. You know, I've only had the honor and the privilege of working with you, Dan, for one term, and one key takeaway that I have observed is that and we may not have agreed on everything, but basically one thing I've taken away is that everything you've done on the council is really motivated by your sincere belief in what you're doing is for the best interest of Mercer Island. And for that, I think Mercer Island, you know, you're a public servant to the nth degree, and I think the entire island owes you a great deal of thanks. And I, on a personal level, want to thank you.
Debbie, and then Dave.
Well, I've had the pleasure of serving with Dan for 6 years on council, but arguably, for better or for worse, Dan had a lot to do with me making the decision to run. So I guess I thank you for that, at least most of the time. But anyway, working with Dan, you know, both on the council and off the council, I have to say that, you know, he's really shared, I think, some important life lessons with me maybe knowingly or unknowingly. And the first one is you got to have a plan and you got to have a vision, or you have to have a vision and then a plan. You have to work with intensity, and you never say done until it's done. And I thank you for that, and I keep that in mind. I keep in mind many of the words that you said tonight, but it's been truly a learning experience and an honor to work with you, and I hope there's more opportunities in the future.
Dave?
So mostly just a personal thank you. I mean, you have done a lot to reach out and help me personally get started on this very rocky road of the last 2 years. And you think of the things that we took on the last 2 years. I often ask Dan, well, when does the fun part start? I said, don't worry, that's coming. But I think, I have a lot of admiration for your talents, right? For sheer brain power, I don't know many, if any, people that can match you. And the way that you apply that brain power to a problem and can work it in ways that really are never evidenced to anyone else in the room and help people see the way to get to the end. And I think that, your focus on let's get to the result. And we might not agree on the end, but to get to the result is always your focus. And I think it's so encouraging and empowering to be with someone who says, to paraphrase Debbie a little bit, you just don't give up. There's not a give up until you've gotten the result you're looking for. And I think that we will miss the tribal knowledge. And I think from sheer, Bruce and I were talking this weekend, the sheer recollection power. So I'm hoping we can fund a red telephone where we can pick it up to phone a friend on issues that no one has the tribal knowledge on. But, in an era where we've moved away from what public service means, and it's changing, I think, dramatically. I think you come from a school where you really you do it to serve the community that you live in, and you've made countless numbers of changes and impacts. And I think that the island is grateful to you, but more than anything, I just want to express my own personal thanks for the help.
Wendy, Tom?
Yeah. So, Dan, we met years ago when I sought an appointment on this council, and you told me I would be a better candidate. So right off the bat, I knew you were smart and passionate and certainly opinionated, and I've appreciated your intellect and your tenacity for years. And while we haven't always agreed, your brain power is second to none, and your commitment to this community is honorable. So I really appreciate your service to the community. I appreciate your counsel on all of the issues that we've talked about and dealt with in the last 2 years. And I know how much you care about Micah, so I've made a donation on your behalf to Micah, and I hope that we can continue working together in that regard. And my snarky self also got you a Western red cedar because I know how much you care about tree canopies and our urban forest, and I do too. And I think we have that common interest together, and I know we're going to keep working together. Your work at Forterra, your work in this community is not done. And I know your passion is here, and your tenacity is here, and your brain power is here. So while you're not on this council, I have no doubt you're going to be involved in the issues going forward. And I look forward to working with you and being collaborative and having a shared vision that we can work on together. So I hope we can. So thank you for your service.
Tom, you want to? Okay.
So, like Debbie, Dan's probably the reason I'm sitting up here, too. I first met Dan when we were talking about, what'd you call it, Grouse Mountain? Grouse Hill? Grouse Mountain. And his perspectives got me very interested in what's going on with the city. And I will tell you that if you aren't a chess player and you wanted to learn about chess, Dan is the person, because there's always a move within a move, a play within a play, and an action within that creates a reaction. And he does really care about Mercer Island, and that's why his strategic and tactical moves are so valuable to any city council, because if you have somebody like Dan on your side, he will, what was it? Somebody said he will focus on the end game, and he will help you get there. So I've learned a lot from Dan. I was going to trade him my social media guide for dummies for his email list, but I'm not sure he'll take me up on that. But thank you, Dan, for everything. And it's been a wonderful learning experience from you, and I've grown a lot. So thank you.
Okay, so that, I suspect, reaches us to the moment where a lot of people probably want to exit before the meeting gets dull. And you're welcome to do that, or sit tight, and we can move right into the city manager's report. If a lot of people are going to go, though, I'm just going to pause so that you can go and we don't disrupt the next bit of the meeting.
my God, those kids were so cute.
They worked hard.
All of them.
Oh, yeah, you should have seen their school projects.
Was that your mom and dad?
They were here. I don't know who they are now.
They were. Those were your parents. Those were your parents on the end?
We're standing there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, and if somebody could just pull the door there so that, never mind. Sounds like that's not, okay. Kirsten set it up, but Julie, over to you, I think.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Since this is my last city manager's report for the year, I hope you'll indulge me. It's a little long, but there's a lot to cover. First of all, for those who might be wondering where Councilmember Neese is, so as you recall, the council appointed him for actually Councilmember Acker's position. So even though Councilmember Neese, he is home actually battling a cold, he is still working on behalf of the citizens and will be back here in January. So, okay. I want to just mention last week, as you recall, the council hosted a, I don't have the clicker. The council hosted the very first time, thanks Kirsten, the very first time we invited the 41st delegation for a discussion. And I just wanted to mention, many of you know it was not televised, however, there is an audio available, and you can visit the city's website and pull that down. And I wanted to address why didn't we televise it, and in consultation with staff, and recognize that really the past practice or the standard procedure has been to televise council's regular business meetings. So considering that this was a special meeting, we made the determination, actually I made the determination not to televise it. And other reasons, it was you weren't planning to vote, you weren't taking action, it was really merely a discussion, really an informal discussion with our delegation. In addition, there were obviously consideration around the budget. We're at around 90% of our budget, and we're still waiting for November and December invoices. So we were being a little cautious about those dollars. Some of you may not know, we actually, our videographer, we contract for that position, so we don't have as much control around that. So was something as part of my consideration. So why do I bring it up? Well, I want to recognize we have another council special meeting coming up in January. It's the council's annual really goal-setting process and work plan setting process. Actually, the council, on behalf of the residents, devote about 12 to 13 hours of their weekend time working with the staff, rolling up our sleeves and talking around kind of emerging issues, reviewing the goals and work plan. Have we made progress? Do those need to change? And so it's a real get down and get some work done kind of meeting. Very different than a business meeting. However, I do want to recognize we do want to be open and transparent. Of course, the planning session, obviously we publish those, we notice those. It is open to the community. Actually, we host it here in the community. I know some councils actually leave town, they go off-site, but not in the case of Mercer Island. We're here. We host those meetings here. So I would like to plant the seed that maybe, Mayor, at the end of the meeting, during our planning session, when we review the the calendar and the agenda items, if you might indulge me and spend some time talking about whether or not you would want us to televise 12 hours of that meeting, or continue to do it the same practice we've done. So let me plant that seed and just know when to come back to that.
Okay.
Okay, so excited. We received a TIB grant, a $500,000 matching grant. So the Transportation Improvement Board, in fact, cities all across the state really apply for grants, and we were one of the lucky cities to receive this grant. This will fund the the Southeast 40th Street corridor, and it will actually improve the walk route for Northwood Elementary and Mercer Island High School, and improve circulation and safety for bicyclists and pedestrians by completing gaps in the existing ped bike facilities on Southeast 40th Street between Island Crestway and 88th Avenue Southeast. So this project totals $1.7 million, and really excited that we were able to leverage our local tax dollars with some state grants for this project. We're looking at starting it in the spring and over the summer months. So excited about that. And also, maybe some of you have seen the field turf installation at Island Crest Park. It's so exciting to see this actually happening. And also, I wanted to really send my thanks and gratitude to the Mercer Island High School Baseball Booster Club for really funding the new scoreboard. So that's going to be a great facility for our community. So that was installed just last week. Also want to update you on, some sustainability updates. All right. So tracking the city's carbon footprint, we are working on an online dashboard. It's powered by Scope 5. It's in draft form. Ross is really busy working on the beta version. If you're interested in seeing what this product could look like for us, Bellevue actually has an existing public dashboard. So go and check that out. Also, energy efficiencies are our council subcommittee, and that includes Mayor Bassett, Councilmember Weichert, and Councilmember Wong have been working on an interactive spreadsheet. It's in collaboration with Smart Building Center in Bellevue in Seattle. And this allows exploration of 5 years of energy use and associated costs for each major city building, and compares those with similar buildings in this climate in order to view our relative energy efficiency and possible performance improvements. And National Solar Power Award, following a complex and months-long application and certification process, Ross has just received notice of achieving top gold status under the Department of Energy's Soul Smart program, joining only 2 other cities in all of Washington and Oregon. And that's pretty outstanding, I think. Yeah, let's applause. That's a good one. The designation indicates that the city meets stringent and objective criteria targeting removing obstacles to solar development and being open for solar business. Really exciting. And then finally, one thing I'm really very excited about is sustainable Mercer Island. So with the assistance from community members, Ross has continued to grow this informal, we call it the greens, right, of Mercer Island, our sustainable Mercer Island. They're working with us to draft the city's sustainability and climate action plan in 2018. Right now, we have about 50 enthusiastic members on the email list. A number of council members are involved in this as well. And the next meeting we are hosting, Sustainable Mercer Island is convening is next Monday, December 11th at 6:30 at the Community Center. And I'm sure if anyone's interested in sustainability, they would welcome your participation. Residential development standards, as you know, this was effective November 1st. The staff held its first of 3 informational meetings on Thursday, November 30th, to review the changes to the code. Also, staff have, of course, been working with applicants at the permit counter, addressing their questions, and in pre-application meetings. The staff also has 2 more informational meetings scheduled for December 7th and December 12th. And also, we're preparing informational tip sheets for our customers and the public and explaining the new standards, and, of course, doing our best to really try to be helpful and provide guidance and support for any of our permit customers. The Chamber is hosting its annual holiday luncheon this Thursday from 12 to 1 at the Community Center. If you're interested in attending, email the Chamber by tomorrow noon. Attending, you can enjoy over 20 artists selling unique holiday gifts, the high school jazz band, and the high school drama group. So that sounds like a great event to attend. Also starting on Friday, actually just after Thanksgiving, our Youth and Family Services Foundation has a holiday tree lot at the Farmers Insurance Parking Garage. The Lions Club has been helping with this, and what's great about this, of course, is all proceeds support the charitable activities of both the organizations. So sales will be taking place through December 22nd. And, of course, if you'd like to learn more, just visit miyfs.org. Returning, the Argosy Holiday Ship Festival on Friday, December 22nd, 7:30 to 9 p.m. at the Luther Burbank Park. Gather on the beach near the docks. You can enjoy a bonfire, some warm drinks, s'mores, music, and lights. And, of course, it's free for everyone. I also want to note some holiday city closures. City Hall and the Community Center, of course, will be closed on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. And then we do have a modified schedule at the Community Center for the year-end maintenance that'll be taking place there. So we spruce up annually by painting, doing carpet cleaning, and managing the waxing of floors and other general maintenance. So it'll be closed to the public from December 18th through the 25th. The fitness room and the public areas are open on the 26th through the 30th. And then on December 31st, the fitness room and public areas are only open from 8:30 to noon. And then we're back to our regular operating hours on January 2nd. And then for Islanders who, of course, participate in our refuse and recycling, every collection more or less just shifts a day. So if your collection is on Monday, put it out on Tuesday, et cetera, et cetera. So plan on that for your holiday. And I know many of us are getting boxes, so be sure to recycle those cardboard boxes. Christmas tree chipping service starts on December 26th, and it goes through Friday, January 12th. Please deliver your undecorated Christmas trees right here at the maintenance building right behind City Hall, and we will chip those. And, of course, the chippings will be used at our parks, trails, and open spaces. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to call our Public Works at 275-7608. And then finally, mark your calendar for the next City Financial Challenges Community Advisory Group meeting. It will take place on Saturday, January 6th from 9 to 12, so half a day at the Community Center. And the purpose for this meeting is to review the city's operating budget. Of course, everyone is welcome to attend, and you can learn more by visiting the city's website. And then just like to leave you all, our entire community, with best wishes for a joyous holiday season. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Bruce?
That was quite a report. Yeah.
That's quick. Hey, Julie, on the grant we got, you said that the cost of the project was $1.7 million in total?
For which project?
Southeast 40th?
Oh, I'm sorry, 1.1.
1.1? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, with the city manager's report done, we come to appearances, which is the time when anyone may address the council on any issue you wish. You'll have, as always, 3 minutes. Please begin by introducing yourself and giving your address. The detailed rules of engagement are on the back door, but they really do just boil down to please be civil. And Allie's got to get the cord set up, so we'll take just a minute and let her get that all set, and then we'll be underway. If folks wanted to start to gently queue up, you could do that, and it would get us going sooner. Is that all you need? Or? Yeah, we're good. Okay, we're good. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Peter Struck, residing at 9130 Southeast 54th Street. First, I want to welcome new and returning council members. I look forward to your leadership in the coming year. And again, my congratulations to Councilmember Grouse for his many, many years of service. I have a few comments for your consideration this evening regarding the agenda. First, I'd like to thank Councilmember Neese in absentia, I guess, for highlighting the dramatic change in the school impact fee. Now, I know from the city's perspective, it's just a documentation issue, and you don't really kind of have any quote-unquote direct skin in the game. But I think it is important to look at that because there is some kind of generational equity kinds of things that was raised last week, and I just raise it here. Secondly, and perhaps more germane, is there's a collective bargaining agreement before you this evening. And while if you read the agenda summary of this, it focuses on medical insurance options and so forth, I'd like to point out that the proposed COLA provision increase for just 2018 is about $100,000, and that represents about 20% of the proposed budget deficit for this year. So it's a big item. And if you look at 2019, because the budget is supposed to increase dramatically, it's only about a 5%, but it's still a big issue. So the contract proposal is really not insignificant by any means, and I look forward to a robust discussion among you regarding this issue, not just a rubber stamping of it. Third, you'll hear a report from the city manager about commuting, and parking solutions. And there's a wide array of exciting options that are presented there. What I'm somewhat afraid of is that we'll get stuck in an analysis paralysis type of state of affairs because there is so many of them. So I would urge the council to provide some direction, to focus on perhaps just a couple lower cost, easier, maybe call it low-hanging fruit types of options so we can move forward. And we can show residents that we can get something done in 2018 and use some of that $10 million plus settlement money from Sound Transit. And then finally, I hope the city manager in January during one of the planning sessions will present a scorecard to the community as perhaps listing the top five priorities of the city this past year, and I think we know them quite easily of what those are, and really an honest assessment of whether the process and the outcome, did it meet expectations, did it exceed expectations, did it maybe fall short. I'd be real curious to see that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Close appearances. Move to consent calendar. We have a long enough consent calendar that I won't bother to read all the items. I understand there's at least one item to be pulled. And you want to go ahead and do that, or if you don't, that's fine too. But
I have to confess, I don't understand the protocols for the
So you just let us know
calendar.
that you want it pulled off the consent calendar, and we then do the consent calendar without that.
Correct.
Yeah. And which item is it that you wanted to pull?
That was the one around the zoning changes.
AB 5365, 2017 Comprehensive Plan Amendment, second reading and adoption.
Thank you. So we'll move that to the first item of regular business, and that leaves us with the rest of the consent calendar. Dave, do you have something you want to pull?
Yeah, I just wanted to pull 5371 just for a quick discussion. Julie, if you're okay.
Okay.
If you and I can talk about that exchange today so the public has some visibility into that.
Okay, so we've got those two items pulled. Anything else? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept the consent calendar as revised?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we'll go to Agenda Bill 5371, the AFSCME 2018-19 Collective Bargaining Agreement first, just since it comes in that order on the consent calendar. Dave, you want to tee that up?
So thanks to Julie and Chris Siegel for getting to the agreement. There's an item in there that I know has been sort of a topic of discussion around the community, and wanted to bring it out, which is we've got the vacation bank issue, and so I raised the question earlier today with Chris Siegel, our Director of Human Resources, as well as our City Manager, about how do we start to have the discussion on an item that's baked into a 2-year agreement, and I think Chris had a solid answer on that. And Julie, do you mind characterizing that, or you want? I don't want to read her email exactly, but
Pardon me about that. Yeah, I think the question came up of kind of here you have a contract before you to adopt and approve, and the question came up, is this an opportunity to address leave accruals? And that question has come up regarding, especially around the city's financial challenges, is that could we open it? And really, this is, typically I believe we do 3-year contracts. This is really targeted for a 2-year contract, negotiated a shorter term, and a lot of that is keeping that ability open to address that if we need to in the future. I know Jason Kittner is here. He was part of this management negotiation team on this contract and can hopefully address some of the questions that you might have, additional questions you might have, but hopefully that kind of characterizes it there. So whereas I would say it's before you to be adopted, if the council gives us direction to want to look at that in the next contract negotiation, we certainly can.
So, okay. So with that, since you pulled it, it would be in your court
So I
to
need
make the
to-
motion if you so choose.
So I move to adopt Agenda Bill 5371 on the collective bargaining agreement.
And the language is actually at the bottom of page 2.
Oh, sorry.
I can read it for you if you'd like.
Great.
Authorize the city manager to sign the AFSCME collective bargaining agreement with the AFSCME bargaining unit for the period of January 1, 2018 through December 31, 2019 in substantially the form attached here to as Exhibit 1.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Benson?
I guess, Dave was asking for some direction, and I haven't heard that. I mean, do we want to give direction to staff, to the city manager, to raise this issue about the accrual, the vacation bank during the next 2 years?
Okay, Debbie?
I think I'm going to try to paraphrase. What I took away from our city manager's statement, well, extrapolated perhaps from her statement, is that in the event that as we go through the whole CAG process and we're looking at the city's finances, that this would certainly be part of the discussion, the element of vacation accrual and impacts to the city's finances and future liabilities would be discussed then, and subsequent to the CAG and council discussion, specific direction could be given. So that was my interpretation. I see nodding, so I'm hoping that was the intent. Okay.
Is that satisfactory to you, Benson?
It is, and as long as it does come up in the CAG discussion, I guess we just don't want to lose it. I mean, if it doesn't come up in the CAG discussion, I think we just want to make a point that obviously some people are raising that.
In fact, as you know, we have a number of talented CAG members who have raised questions around personnel costs. As a service organization, probably no surprise that 70% of our expenditures are around personnel costs, the people who deliver the services. So we fully intend to have a very robust conversation with our community advisory group members around this issue, around paying at the median, what our leave accruals are. We've had questions around pension costs. We've had obviously questions, COLA costs, and so in fact in that Saturday meeting, the next meeting in January, we are planning to do a little more of a dive into that conversation because it is so much, obviously, it's a question of believing if you have an expenditure problem or a revenue problem. And I think right now they really want to dive into the expenditure and understand where are all those tax dollars going. And naturally, as a service organization, it is going to pay for the bodies that do the work. So we'll definitely get into that. I also envision at the planning session that you have in January, we'll talk a little bit about the budget schedule. But recall last year we suspended the mid-year planning session. That I envision I will need to do that this coming year, and that might be the time where we get some more specific direction actually from you on what to do going forward in preparing the 19 and 20 budget.
Okay. Dave, did you? No? Okay, so we have a motion on the table. It's moved, seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, Agenda Bill 5365, the comp plan motion or bill. Tom, you asked for that to be pulled, so I turn to you.
Yeah, it's mostly because, first of all, I'm learning the processes, but secondly, I don't have the history where I felt comfortable voting on this one. And I noticed that staff recommended the change, Planning Commission didn't. And in my conversations with the city manager, she recommended that if I was intending to abstain from a vote, that it would have to be pulled from the consent calendar so we could have a discussion about it. And really, I'm just kind of looking to y'all to kind of explain a little bit about this to me and why we're moving forward with it at this point in time.
So, Julie, maybe we go to you, or you want to hand off to Scott? Or
yeah, Mayor, would you? We are prepared to just run through that agenda bill and what the staff is requesting. So, would you?
And specifically, it's staff recommended one thing, the Planning Commission recommended another, and I'm just wondering because in meetings that I've participated in, generally
why is
Yeah.
staff recommending something else? If I could have if I could ask Evan Maxim, our planning manager, to explain and outline the merits of our recommendation.
Evan, if you would, before you start, can you spin the TV so that we can? I think the audience has got a good shot at that. For us, it's sorry. Thank you.
I live in the land of giants. Mayor, Council, of course, my name is Evan Maxim. I'm the planning manager for the city of Mercer Island. To Councilmember Acker's question, the distinction here, so the Planning Commission, to remind the Council, recommended that the City Council adopt all of the comprehensive plan amendments except one. The one was proposed by a private party, Mr. Cohn, who I believe is here in the audience today. He had proposed amending the comprehensive land use designation for some city-owned property adjacent to his town center-owned property, amending that land use designation from I-90/linear park to town center, and then changing the zoning designation from P public institution to town center. And there are some correlating town center code amendments that go along with that particular comprehensive plan amendment. The city staff had prepared a staff recommendation to the Planning Commission based upon our initial presentation to the Planning Commission, I believe, if memory serves, in August or September, and then the Planning Commission actually considered in September making their recommendation. For the Cone Amendment, there was not consensus, there was not support on the Planning Commission for recommending approval to the City Council. And I think the concern that I heard from the Planning Commission, and this was articulated in your packet from November 17th, was around a couple of different items. Primarily, I'll characterize related to what the public benefit or community benefit would be from redesignating and rezoning this property. Earlier this afternoon, I think we reprised some of that staff presentation in an email to the City Council where we articulated why the city staff recommendation had indicated that we believe that this change to the comprehensive plan designation and the correlating code amendment was consistent with the community permit. I'm stuttering. The comprehensive plan policies that were adopted for town center, and I can recite those again if you're so interested tonight. The basic idea is that we have a number of comprehensive plan goals and policies around encouraging development within our town center, which changing the land use designation for this piece of city-owned property would allow the city council to further if they so chose at a later date. There's not a specific proposed public improvement or private development or something of that nature that goes along with this change to the comprehensive plan and the development regulations. That, for example, in the community, there's certainly been a lot of speculation around a possible sale of this property. That would be a separate council decision at a later date. And it may not be a decision that you would decide to authorize, and that would be entirely legitimate, still authorizing this comprehensive plan and code change. So what this change does is it furthers your comprehensive plan goals, furthers your comprehensive plan policies, and provides the council more options to consider when you're determining how to dispose of this property. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that, I think, is the basis for the misalignment, if you will, between the Planning Commission recommendation and the DSG recommendation.
Thank you, Evan. Questions, council? Seeing none. Okay, so that brings us to, would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that we adopt ordinance number 17-23 and ordinance number 17C-24, adopting the 2018 comprehensive plan amendments and accompanying zone amendments. 17? Isn't it
17.
17?
These would be the 2017 comprehensive plan amendments.
2017 comprehensive plan amendments and accompanying zone amendments.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And abstention?
I'm going to abstain
Okay.
from this one.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much, Evan.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, that moves us now to Agenda Bill 5370, Sound Transit Settlement Agreement Implementation, Traffic and Safety Mitigation, Last First Mile Solutions, Short-Term Parking. And find where I am. Julie, you have your name on this. Kirsten, you're stepping up. I'm not sure who to hand off to.
Julie.
Julie?
And then you work the lip?
By the way, I choose to believe that every single Mercer Island City Council meeting has punch and tape.
Yeah, they do. They do. We're just one big party. Party hard.
They've had a good time.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Sure.
He's going to see.
So lift first or side by side?
You first,
Okay.
but side by side.
Sure.
Todd, you want to come up? Let's see. Is this on? All right.
No.
Oh, you're going to, okay.
Either way. I know everything I've done so far has been wrong.
That's okay. That's all right. That's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
All right. Good evening. We try to set this up because we really do want this to feel more like a study session. It's really the first of many conversations the staff will have with the council about the Sound Transit Settlement Agreement. Recall that the council negotiated over $10 million for mitigation and various amounts in various categories. Some for traffic and safety, some for commuter parking, some for first mile, some for short-term parking. And then, of course, we have the ability, if we choose not to spend it all in one area, to move it in different buckets. So I'm excited to present this first one. There are a lot of options, a lot of things for you all could do, but one of the things we're interested in exploring is rideshare, and so we have been talking with Uber and To my left is Jackson Taylor. He's the manager of public sector partnerships for Uber. And to my right, some of you may recognize Todd Kelsey. He was formerly our director of transportation for the school district and now general manager of Pacific Northwest for Lyft. So, and we've got both of them here to talk about the services and the kinds of things they may be able to provide our residents to address that first last mile problem. So let's just kind of get started here. So as I mentioned, there's a number of pots of money to address different things. So let's get into first and last mile solutions. And I think ultimately having perhaps the objective of being less reliant on the single occupant vehicle. So one possibility is to, and we've heard our residents say, well, hey, I can't even access transit. There's no parking. There's no, as you know, our on-island transit is really weak. So we want to help our residents get to transit. So one idea is to explore ride sharing with Uber and Lyft. And so if you don't mind, we'll just have them present. They've got some materials to present with you. So we'll just kind of take it one at a time, starting with Jackson with Uber, and then we'll have Todd with Lyft. And if you could, maybe just have it informal, ask questions, maybe after his presentation, and then, okay?
Very good. Welcome.
We're going to pull that up now. All right.
All right. Thank you very much, Julie. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you so much for having me this evening. My name is Jackson Taylor. I manage public sector partnerships for Uber here in the Pacific Northwest. Couldn't be more excited to walk you through some elements of a proposal that we put together to provide first and last mile service on Mercer Island. And we can go ahead and switch to the next slide, or you can just hand me the clicker either way. It's the down arrow. There we go. So we have quite a lot of experience offering similar types of first and last mile service throughout the Seattle area. Some of you may have seen in the Seattle Times, we've put together things like a transit discount program where customers who begin or end their trip in a light rail within close proximity to a light rail station receive $3.50 off their trip, which is a pilot program we've been running in coordination with our partners at Sound Transit and King County Metro. We've also in the past, my mic's playing tricks on me. We've in the past offered discounted Uber Hop trips, which is a deprecated service, but a service that we offered when the viaduct was out of commission for a period of time. And so we've offered these types of programs before. We have not offered any of these types of programs on Mercer Island before. And we know that there's elevated interest in transit connections due to I-90 HOV lane closures. And what I've put up here is that the park and ride lot is usually full by 7:30 on work days. I actually spoke at a networking event with a gentleman by the name of Pawan who lives on the south end of the island, who told me 7:30 is very, very generous, that it might actually be earlier.
7.
So why are we so interested in offering these types of services? You know, we understand that individual private car usage is incredibly inefficient. If you look at an aggregate scale, and we are a global company, we have 1.2 billion cars that spend 95% of their time parked without anybody inside. And when they are moving, they're usually moving one person, eating up 50% of our global oil reserves. And so this is a sustainability problem. I'm very encouraged to hear that the city and residents of the city are taking these types of problems very seriously, and we do think that we can be part of the solution. So what is our solution? We want fewer, fuller, and more efficient vehicles and trips, right? And with fewer trips, you know, one driver on our network is offering as many as 10 or more trips per day to riders. That means that your existing transportation infrastructure can be more efficient. It can accommodate more trips on the road by virtue of the fact that there are fewer vehicles on the road. we also want to make those cars fuller, and with our Uber Pool product, we can do just that, which leads to VMT reduction, which is a metric that several cities and organizations use when determining if they're hitting their sustainability targets. And then lastly, more efficient vehicles, our drivers' interests are aligned with interests of cities, private organizations interested in sustainability, because they know that if they can make those trips happen as efficiently as possible, that's less money they're spending on fuel costs and less fuel that's being used for those trips. And so our proposal is in 2 phases. We'd like to start with roughly a 12-week pilot phase where Uber would be happy to split the cost 50-50 with the City of Mercer Island on trips from anywhere on the island that end at the Mercer Island Park and Ride, or vice versa, right? A trip that begins at the Mercer Island Park and Ride and ends anywhere on the island, where riders have inputted a discount code in their app that's MI Transit. And that means that only riders that input the app would have their trip paid for by Uber and the City of Mercer Island, which means lower trip volume at first, which is, we think, a good thing for the pilot phase, because that means that we can test various things, like do we need to have boosts to driver earnings on the island so that we have more drivers here, so that we can account for an increased trip volume later on. So that would be the pilot phase, and then for the remainder of 2018, we would just turn on the whole island so that any trips that meet those criteria, meaning they begin somewhere on Mercer Island and they end at the Park and Ride, or vice versa, we would back bill the City of Mercer Island for those trips, but they would be offered at no cost to the rider. Yes?
Just a quick clarification, if you could, for the islanders that are not cool hipsters already, if just definitions for X and Pool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So an Uber X is a single trip, so the driver would not make a second pickup of additional riders. It's direct point-to-point from wherever the rider wants to be picked up to wherever the rider wants to go. So that would help satisfy the fewer criterion, which I mentioned earlier. But then a pool trip, there's a chance that you get paired with somebody that's going in the same direction. And we hope as this product scales, more and more people will make use of it and all be going to the Mercer Island Park and Ride to catch their bus to go to the city or wherever it is. And so the pool product would serve that need. So just a little bit about the pilot phase. I just wanted to show you what it would take in order for someone to make use of the pilot. They just have to enter a discount code on their app. They'd only have to enter it one time, and then every subsequent trip until we decided to move out of the pilot phase and into an overall phase would be offered at no cost to that rider, and we would back bill you. Lastly, I'm sure you guys want to know a little bit about cost. These numbers should not be taken to be overly precise because there were a number of assumptions that were made in order to get them, such as that we would include both Uber Pool and Uber X. Obviously, if we wanted to just keep it to a pool product, that would change these assumptions considerably. In the pilot phase, not everybody will enter the code. And then we assume that because they'd be getting a ride at no cost to them, that trip volumes would increase and that there'd be additional word-of-mouth escalation over time. So just wanted to give you some sense for what we think the pricing would be to the city once we got this up and running.
So I think what I'm not seeing or understanding is how many people this is. Because I'm seeing a price per week, but I don't know if that's based on an assumed number of people moved from south to north and then subsequently north.
Yeah, so we would definitely provide aggregated information to the city as we invoiced, and this is based on actual information. I took a look at how many of these sorts of trips are happening, and I'll say as of right now, there's not that many. It's roughly in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 trips per week on Mercer Island, but of course we would expect that to increase quite a lot.
So what's the average price per trip then?
Roughly $8 to $9.
So on the assumption then that we actually doubled the number of riders, it would actually double the cost?
Well, not on a per trip basis, but yeah, I mean on an overall cost basis, yes. But the phase 2 is presuming that twice as many trips will be taken as are being taken today.
Okay, I guess just at some point I'd need to better understand how many people are actually getting used, because I understand it in an abstract, but obviously when a pilot is something that you're testing, and so what are the variables that we're trying to test? And one of them, I think that at least many of us would share, is we want as many people taking advantage as possible, but then equally you need to understand what the budget implications are. And the way this is structured right here, I'm not sure I can do the quick enough math to say, okay, what if we get, and I'll make up a number, 400 people a week? What does that mean? And then subsequently, how long does our money last? So I think as we go forward, that would be great to understand.
Absolutely. And one thing we're happy to do is, I could do a weekly check-in meeting with Julie where we could see if trip volumes are outside of what we had expected. And so if you guys decided that you wanted to allocate a finite amount of money to this pilot, I would, of course, stay in touch with Julie to make sure that we don't blow through a budget or anything like that.
I think Wendy had her hand up first, and then to Dave.
So, Jackson, I'm just curious if the Seattle model is free and if there's a chance to build in some sort of user cost to have users put a little bit of skin in the game?
The Seattle model is not free, and that pilot ends at the end of January, but we do offer a $3.50 discount, which is kind of the equivalent cost of a transit trip taken. We can, of course, make it so that the rider has some skin in the game. We can also do a percent-based discount instead of a whole enchilada. That's totally fine.
Dave? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm thinking about promoting it, and free is great, but then you can't step back from that very easily.
Right. Very true.
So I just want to kind of follow up on what Debbie said. If you could, I don't think we're worried about the sort of the check-in and the ongoing thing. It's the understanding the basic mathematics behind it. So I think we're looking for more of a pro forma. How many trips do you estimate happening over the course of the first year, the next year? And is that when you say it's 25 to 30 trips, that's a week, correct?
Correct.
With an average of $9, and that is an inter-island trip, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so that's good. And then sort of like a pro forma projection on what you think the volumes are, and that I don't know how to do that, but you guys are all know how to do that stuff.
Sure.
Because I think there's going to be a calculus of what's the sliding scale of the money that we have to spend, plus, to Wendy's point, how do we get the user to pay, and how do we maximize the use of the benefit and make it a sustainable use of some dollars that we have access to. So the fundamentals of the math equation will be super useful to us.
Well, if
Understood.
I'm sorry.
Wait, let me take a turn, and then I'll come over to you, because I'm going to actually go up a level. I think it's up a level. So in conversation with the folks doing alternative services at Metro, I understand that both you and Lyft are in conversation with them and close to doing a pilot with them. And what I understand from them is that there's been a lot of conversation around their strong desire to have a great deal of trip information as part of the package that they're getting. The kinds of information I think that's being asked for here, but I think also more than that. And so I'm wondering, could you summarize what information you're anticipating supplying as part of that? Does it supply what's being asked for here? And I'm guessing it does, and then goes beyond that. And perhaps you could lay out what the terms are there that you're looking at.
Yeah.
And before you do it, Dan, if your question sort of went in a different direction, I don't want to lose it. But okay.
So. Providing data can be a sticky wicket at times, and I think that sometimes in government, if this is an area or an industry that has previously been the purview of a public agency, there is a bit of a public agency expectation that will kind of hand over every piece of data imaginable under the sun. The types of information that you guys are asking for is absolutely information that we can provide. And we will provide aggregated information, right? A cost per trip, how many trips were taken, we could even break it out so that, if we wanted to say this many came from the south end versus the center of the island versus the north side of the island. But what we can't do is provide such granular information that someone could take a close look and say, oh, I know who took that trip and where and when and perhaps why. We don't want to violate any privacy of our riders. That's something that we take very seriously. So it's always striking that right balance, but the types of information that you guys have asked for this evening is certainly information that we can provide.
Okay. Dan, go ahead.
So, I mean, just using your numbers here in the $8 or $9 per trip, then just in phase 2, that's 100 trips. And if I divide that for round trip, that's 50 people that are benefiting from this service is I mean, that's just simple math doing it, if I get your numbers correct. But so I first, a couple of things. I completely agree with Wendy that the notion that
Let's just pause on that
yeah.
for a moment.
Soak it in.
Yeah. It's a tree, Wendy. It's a tree. I'm feeling,
Yeah. They warned me you like to dive into the details.
it's just the notion that we don't want to have it free from the outset, because then it's much harder to undo that. And nor should it be free, because people are getting a benefit of not having to purchase parking or not having to have their spouse or partner or whoever drive them down there and go down and pick them up again. That service has a value, and that should be recognized. But secondly, I think that it's critical for this to be a success. There has to be predictability as to a fare. So when someone's sitting down in the South End, it shouldn't be a situation where one day it's $5, the next day it's $10, and the next day it's $7.50. That drives people crazy for when they're commuters. They want to know day in and day out that this is what it's going to cost for this service. So I think hopefully you can create a system that actually says that anything from 40th up, it's $3, from 40th to 53rd, it's $4, from 53rd to 68th, whatever. I mean, there's ways of dividing into zones or something that people know exactly what they're getting. And I do think that the notion of focusing on Uber Pool, so when you say $8 or $9, are you saying that that's $8 or $9 per pool trip, and you assume probably 2 people per pool vehicle is probably your assumption?
The $8 or $9 was an average for X and pool, and I did not run any sort of analysis to see what the cost differential would be between pool and X, but we can assume that there would be a cost differential. Yeah. That would be cheaper to if you wanted to run this as pool only.
But I mean, I very much appreciate the willingness of Uber to help subsidize the pilot. I think that's great, and I'm sure Lyft will do even better. But I think that the key thing from my standpoint would be just making sure that when people understand the program, they know exactly what they're getting into, and they know that. They know with certainty there'll be enough cars on the island, so they're not sitting there twiddling their thumbs for half hour waiting for a car to show up, or however we're going to do it. It's the certainty and the predictability which I think ultimately makes this a success.
Benson?
I was curious as far as the pilot that you're discussing, Jackson. Has Uber done this in any other city? I mean, you mentioned Seattle, but I'm thinking in terms of a smaller city comparable to Mercer Island. And can you just describe this, the issues that developed and basically how that program is working?
There's been quite a few examples of us running similar types of pilots in the city of Summit, New Jersey, in lieu of building a new parking garage and spending all that upfront capital. They decided to enter into an agreement with Uber where we would take people directly to and from their park and ride stations, and we think that's a great use case for our product. We know that those parking structures can be very, very expensive and might not serve the long-run needs of transportation as it increasingly becomes automated and shared and electric. So there's a reason that we thought that a pilot phase would make a lot of sense here, because there are always unforeseen consequences. I think you guys have pointed out a very good one, which is we might just be creating a free rider problem if it's 100% free. So, but in my experience, especially when you have an extended pilot, you can get those kinks worked out and create a product that your riders really like and that your residents will really like.
So the one in New Jersey, was at a discounted rate, or?
I don't know for certain. I believe that we were back billing the city in the same way that we would be here, but don't take that to be gospel. I'm not 100% confident in that.
Tom?
Couple of things. These are easy questions, so I'll just give you all three and you can answer them.
Sure.
I'm assuming that Phase 2 is contingent on Phase 1 being successful.
Correct.
And in the similar market where the New Jersey model, what was the percentage of increase there? Because let's say it catches on like crazy, then you have a 10x factor, then you're looking at $33,000 over the, is that right? $33,000 over the 10 weeks. So I'm curious on what the percentage is. And the final question is, what are the age limitations for using this? And if I have an account and I have a 16-year-old son that I don't want to drive to the north end to catch the bus, is there a restriction?
I will have to get back to you on the percentage increase. I do not know the answer to that question, but I will touch base with Julie after this session. And as far as age limitations or terms of service do require that you've reached the age of majority to set up a user account. We have worked on products like an Uber Teen type of product where a rider with parental supervision can make use of the product. That is not something that's currently live, but we can absolutely look into whether it makes sense to have that as part of our product offering as we reach the pilot phase here.
Does that include the drivers having background checks?
Absolutely, yeah. Drivers do receive background checks.
One more from me, and I think it looks like maybe we'll be ready to go over to Lyft, but I assume there must be a report of some kind available on the Summit New Jersey experience, whether it's from Uber or from the city itself. Is that something we could impose upon you to gather for us and share with us?
I will look into whether a report exists, and if one does not exist, I will bug the Uber employee charged with implementation and find some lessons learned.
That'd be great.
Question for Julie. Is there a way to get Metro to throw in some cash on this, or have a three-way partner pilot?
Well, yeah. I mean, so we were part of a conversation with Metro. Metro is involved in a pilot project with Uber and Lyft, I think, at this point. I think it's both. And just getting that off the ground at this point with 3 different park and rides, I believe, and maybe both of you can speak to it. So they are already involved in it. They are seeking other opportunities to do pilot alternative service projects. And our conversation with Carol was, awesome. Tell us where you're going, and we'd like to talk more. There's definitely a possibility. But the reason I asked this question about level of data sharing is that I think there's been, and as Jackson points out, a fair bit of negotiation between Metro and the rideshare companies around exactly what information is sufficient to be useful for the cause for them to evaluate fully. So that's one of the things that we, too, will have to assess is how much information do we feel we need in order for this to be sufficiently educational for us to enter into. But that's part of that conversation, I think, with both Metro and then with the rideshare agencies. David Jessen.
Yeah, and this could be for both Uber and Lyft. Is there anything that you all have done, I guess we'll start with Uber, anything that you've done to drive sort of a service level agreement? Because if we're sort of supplanting our infrastructure with a private company, and both Uber and Lyft are the hallmarks of free market, right? So nothing would be worse than us putting a component into our infrastructure that is not predictable for the user. So on Monday I get my car in 3 minutes, and on Tuesday I get it in 93 minutes, right? So have you done anything with that in the public sector for SLA?
There have been various agreements that have been made with cities about service level agreements for reaching certain customer segments. I don't know about every single rider, but we have had those before. But I will say that this is one of the trade-offs, and I would say a positive trade-off associated with having surge, right? We have surge pricing because usually there's excess demand for a product, and we need to provide a financial incentive to bring more drivers onto the app, which then equilibrates, supply and demand. And so that's, on the one hand, a flat fare helps provide more reliability in what it will cost for residents, but surge pricing can help with the problem that you've described and help bring ETAs or estimated times of arrival into something that's also more predictable. So it's kind of, you can you can have one of those, but it's hard to offer both in a market where we have unpredictable supply and demand.
Should we, Benson?
You know, I was just curious whether or not you know how many Uber drivers there are on the island. I mean, in terms of services.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number for Mercer Island in particular. Of course, drivers come from off the island to work on Mercer Island and vice versa. We have over 15,000 driver partners throughout the Seattle metropolitan area.
Okay.
Not many live here.
That's what I'll do during my retirement.
Well, I will
We'd love to have you.
I will share with you now that Mayor Baker, Mayor of Kenmore, in his time when he is not a mayor, he is a Uber driver. Yeah. All right. Welcome, Todd. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Yes.
Mayor, City Council members. Yeah, I feel like I should be talking to you guys about like propane-fired buses or safe routes to school, but that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. I'll keep it brief. I think you've already covered off on a lot of the things that you might want to have asked me about. We can recover that ground if you'd like, but a little bit about Lyft and about how we work with communities. Oh yeah, I got it right in front of me. We kind of hit this already. No surprise to anybody, but cars are an incredibly costly thing that we all, or many people, buy, and they're incredibly underutilized. And yet we're paving over tremendous amounts of our country for more and more parking spots, and that's a bad outcome. Lyft is really committed to our mission of connecting people through communities through better transportation. It's something that we were founded on, and as a company, we have strong values, and this is certainly one of them. By the numbers, surprises people a little bit sometimes that Lyft covers almost the entire country now. Everything we can that regulatorily is allowed. We do over 1 million rides a day in the United States, and where Lyft Line is available, and it is available here in the Puget Sound, Lyft Line is our carpooling service. 40% of those rides are shared rides. A little bit of a way to think about like Lyft Line on Mercer Island. The 5:50 arrives on the island at 6 p.m. And you've got people getting off that want to get a lower price and share their ride for environmental reasons as well. Just picture like the people that live along Island Crest Way are in all likelihood going to be paired and matched in a single car. So that's kind of how it works. So people living along East Mercer, West Mercer, that's kind of the vision that you should have for how Lyft Line would work, and the matching would be done. So we, like Uber, have done a lot of different partnerships to support communities. I think the one I'd point you to is, and we can talk a little bit about. I got some slides on a few things specifically, but like the parking congestion work that we've done in my old hometown before this was my hometown was Boulder, Colorado. Really proud of some of the work we've done there. In Livermore, this one kind of popped out because I thought it reminded me a little bit of what I think you're trying to accomplish with Mercer Island. Trying to encourage ride sharing to the BART stations there, the transit stations, to alleviate congestion. Probably sounds familiar. And in that project, we offered 50% off up to $5 for Lyft Line rides specifically. So in this case, the decision makers decided to focus on the ride-sharing element of Lyft, that being Line, in order to, again, alleviate congestion and bring the prices down. Okay, Boulder is kind of a fun one because the city subsidized rides into the core because of parking problems, and then in order to get some skin in the game from the downtown merchants, what they had was a validation system. So if a Lyft rider got a free ride downtown and visited one of the downtown shops, they were given a code that they could then put in their app to get themselves home. Kind of a cool project. So, here's basically how it would work, and there's some options, and you kind of touched on some of these options, so I'll cover off on them. But, we have the opportunity to work together. You can offer a subsidy, and we would certainly be willing to talk about a partnership where we would invest as well. But we have a system where you can directly in-app offer codes. So you don't have to have your residents, if you choose not to have to enter a code, open their app, and actually put something in. There are different ways to go at that, depending upon what you're trying to accomplish. Mercer Island obviously would be fenced off as its own geofence, and in this case, so rides to and from the park and ride on the island would be the zone that we'd be looking at. But we can set the service parameters around that zone. You can set it for different times and different places. You can start with, hey, we only want to solve the problem from south of 40th or whatever. You can do a lot of different things with the geofencing capability we have. And talking about how you might want to play with the subsidy structure. Yeah, you can give free rides up to a certain amount. You can say free rides up to $5, and then the rest is on you. You can do a percentage discount if you'd prefer, and then you can also do the split fare offering, where the subsidy is always $2 on whatever mode you choose, whether that's classic, our unshared Lyft option, or Lyft Line, the rideshare option. And as I said, you can restrict by time period if you chose to. So that's pretty much how it would work. There's another thing I wanted to touch on that I don't think is probably as important into a pilot that we would do here, but I want you to be aware of, and that is we have a tool that allows for third parties to perhaps, like, at some of the residential areas, that you can have a single entity within those areas order a Lyft for somebody who does not have a smartphone or doesn't have the app, as a way to kind of extend the service to maybe people who, like I said, the elderly or whatever, that don't have the smartphone technology or just don't choose to download Lyft. That was it. I did not come prepared with a specific pilot proposal. I heard you loud and clear. You'd like ours to be more aggressive than Uber's, but I just didn't feel like we had all the information we needed to be able to present you with something meaningful. But I'm more than willing to, in discussion, to take from you what you're most interested in and come together with something that I think would serve your residents very well. And that's it.
And I'll start by saying I think that's fair. We are very much still at the formative thinking stages of this, and certainly it's nice to have something out on the table already, but it's going to take us, I think, a fair bit of education over the coming weeks and months to understand what all the possibilities are, the options are, and get to the point where we're ready to say go on a particular direction. Right. Council members, questions for Todd? Debbie? And then Dan.
Well, I think it probably extends broadly to both organizations and equally to those of us who are sitting up here in city staff as well as the community, and that is, what is the definition of success? We keep saying pilot, and I think we're going to test something, but what is it that we're testing? Are we testing adoption? Are we testing how many drivers we have on the island? Are we testing what the price point is that people will bear? But I'm feeling like, we got to figure out, what is it that we're testing and what are we going to define to be success? Because then you can understand whether or not it's worth continuing or how you want to modify it. So the extent to which there's some interesting examples of other communities, it's pretty fundamental. I'd just like to know, how did they decide to keep going forward and what were they trying to achieve? Because that's a pretty gray area in my mind right now.
No.
Yeah, that's
sorry, Dan, and then Benson.
Fully reasonable.
Todd and Jackson, I guess the same question. Is there a way of assuring that there will be 10 drivers on the island in the morning, or is it completely up to the drivers as to whether they will go here or go somewhere else?
They don't work for Lyft. So all we can do, and what we would do in this case, is incentivize them to be where we need them to be. There was a talk about surge, and our surge is called prime time, and it is our real-time way of balancing, of solving for dramatic supply and demand imbalances. But we know that can be a terrible outcome. Like you said, in the South End, do we want somebody to be trading a 20-minute ETA for a lower price? No, that's bad for all of us. I mean, that's it probably would not achieve the goals that you want to achieve, and we would have a passenger that doesn't really think much of Lyft. So what we would do in this type of environment is make sure that we've incentivized enough drivers to be in the right place at the right time, so that there isn't that dramatic supply-demand imbalance, so that it would work, so they can learn to trust.
To Benson and then to Dave.
I was just curious as far as how Lyft and Uber trying to increase the demand for services. I know that my son uses Uber or Lyft quite a bit. I got to tell you, I haven't. I'm just trying to figure out how would you get people like me to basically start using that service.
Put it on your smartphone.
Well, okay, fine. Okay, I got a smartphone. I have a smartphone, so I can do that. But seriously, how do you guys actually get the public to start changing their mindset?
There are so many different channels to use to reach people about our service. Everything from word of mouth to social media, and you name it. It just and we use all the different channels that we can think of, including passenger-to-passenger referrals, driver referrals, and we know that it really pays off for us to incentivize early passengers to give us a try. So we use a lot of different marketing channels, but in this case, if you're trying to reach out to just your citizens, what we would do is work collaboratively with you to get the word out for your citizens that this is a really viable option, and there's an incentive for you to give it a try. The incentive would be monetary and lifestyle. They wouldn't have to stress over getting to the park and ride by 7 a.m. or earlier. There's just so many different ways to accomplish it, and I think it just really gets down to, again, working with you and using the channels that you have to reach your residents. And then we do scrappy things, too, because we have a lot of people on this island that use Lyft already. So if we choose to reach out to those residents and say, hey, how would you like to refer a fellow resident and get a special bonus, we can do that kind of thing to really juice demand in a particular area, and we'd be willing to do that.
Yeah. I just add a couple of things. I definitely think this will generate some earned media attention, right? I imagine that when this pilot gets off the ground, that the Times will probably take a strong look at putting this in the paper, which is going to immediately provide it some attention. We also have the ability, as I believe Lyft does as well, to put a geofence-based in-app notification. So the first thing you see when you load up the Uber app is, hey, we see you're on Mercer Island. Were you aware of this great pilot? Click the link to learn more. Where, if you were off island, you wouldn't get that message. So definitely lots of levers we can pull to get the word out.
Dave and then Wendy.
Yeah. So I was going to say to you guys, there is your last remaining customer over there at the end. He is the guy. But I think Benson makes a good point that there will be, certainly, as you know, our demographic, there will be a cultural change that we need to drive, and I think there will be a lot that the city needs to do to get that cultural change going. The question I was going to ask to both of you, are either company looking at an exclusive arrangement in order to make it work financially, or are we thinking co-opetition, or what is the plan?
I'm open to anything.
Yeah, we wouldn't require exclusivity.
Wendy and then Dave, Tom.
My question, can we do both and see how it goes? Because I use Uber, I haven't used Lyft. Sorry, an early adopter, you just use what you're used to, right? So give me some competition and I'll download your app. But
okay.
I think that might be a compelling, interesting thing, especially as we get frustrated at 7 a.m. parking and people that, like Benson, don't want to find parking at 7:30 in the morning, but need to. So
sure.
Show us some competition. Let's see what we can get.
Sounds good.
Tom?
I heard the number of drivers that Uber had in the greater Seattle area. How many does Lyft have or maintain?
We have thousands of drivers in the Seattle area.
Okay. And then as far as the demographic, not the demographics, but the geography of the island, I've been timing it recently because I was considering moving to the south end, and it takes approximately 6.5 to 8.5 minutes from the north end of the island to the south end of the island. So when you start looking at the busy rush hour times that Dave was kind of poking at, that I just want to stress that the predictability of the access to services is critical, because the people that are going to be using the cars are all going to be driving or being driven to a schedule. So that's something that we would definitely need to consider, because you don't want to implement a program that's going to backfire on us, not only from a cost perspective but also from a reliability perspective. So I think there's a lot more to come. I rely on my wife to book the Ubers and the Lyfts, and she used Lyft this morning, and she swears by it. I didn't want to get up at 4:30 to drive her to the airport, so selfish, but they're great products. So I really look forward to more conversation on this topic, Mr. Mayor.
Debbie.
I think I'm actually venturing a little bit outside the bounds of the Sound Transit Agreement, but you know, the magnitude of the pilot that we're looking at, and when I say magnitude, I don't mean necessarily in dollars, but I think in terms of the cultural change that we're talking about here, and trying to bring Mercer Island to looking at their transit, their commute, their driving patterns differently. I also think about what I think has been referenced, and those are maybe some of the more vulnerable communities that we have here on the island. You know, I'm thinking about, we've always had groups who take phone calls from the kids on prom night who shouldn't be in their vehicles. We have a lot of seniors here who might need assistance getting to medical facilities that are off the island. We have an Alzheimer's cafe that I'm sure we would love, to include in this partnership. Have you, other organization, pursued those types of partnerships with your communities where you're actually sharing in the values and showing that, you're an integral part? So any examples, whether it's now or in the future, that would really be appreciated too.
Yeah, and we absolutely do, and it's part of, again, part of our core and fundamental belief that we do that. And one of the ways that we can really engage in some of those special communities is with the concierge tool, so that that everybody gets to play, everybody gets a ride. The other thing I wanted to throw out too, when we were talking about the concerns, particularly about the south end, and maybe is the ride going to be there, and predictability, a little bit of education for the passengers, and it's pretty straightforward. You can schedule rides up to 7 days in advance, so that car is where you need it, when you need it, based on that schedule. It's another element that we would have to, help some of your residents understand. But, once they got it, they got it. And if they use it 3 times a week so that they don't have to drive to the park and ride, and they just get in the habit of scheduling those rides, it really is a better outcome.
So we operate a community impact initiative where we partner with over 45 nonprofits in the Puget Sound region to offer ride credits, teach vulnerable populations how to use the app. I'd direct you to more on our website about the community impact initiative, but we're very dedicated to that customer segment.
So, Debbie, you kind of started one down one path, I thought, and then went in another direction, which was perfectly good, but it led me to think of the related question, which is, what about serving handicapped population and folks for whom a normal vehicle isn't a great tool for transportation? Obviously, a regular driver, regular car doesn't work, but do you have experience, and what is it with trying to serve special needs like that? So I've got a wheelchair, for instance, and
right. So in the Seattle area, we pay into in every ride we pay into a fund that supports the Wheelchair Access Vehicle Fund. So when somebody who requires a wheelchair vehicle requests a lift, they're directed through the app to a service that will work for them. It's different in every geography, basically, and how that wave service is handled. But in this area, that's how it's done.
So it's not a mode. It's not a subset of Lyft. It's part of Access.
Right.
Access is the King County program, right?
Right.
Okay, and Jackson?
It works exactly the same way.
Thing.
So there's a small charge on every trip that you take that goes into that fund.
I see. So you're supplementing the availability of that service. I know Metro has been looking at better ways to deliver that service, because it ends up being quite expensive on a per ride basis. But So, okay, thank you. Other questions? I've got another one, but Dave. So we talked a little bit about the Summit, New Jersey experience, and you were going to try and get us more data on that. To you, Todd, I would ask the same question of the Boulder and Dublin experiences. It would be
happy to provide
helpful to, I think, understand sort of the whole scope and success, what was laid out, what happened within those experiences. Dave, you have another one?
I just wanted to say thanks to Uber and Lyft both, and to Julie. And that's cool, right? It's an innovative, really neat approach to a fairly intractable problem, and good on us all.
Yeah, congrats on the settlement. That was a long time coming. Good job. I was still here.
Some say congrats. Some say you blew it.
I say congrats.
So Julie and Kirsten, I know we have, this is only part of a larger conversation about last mile services. Did you have a game plan here for this evening and how to segue then to the rest of the conversation? We're going to let these folks go.
That's right. I wanted them to begin so I could, it's a long meeting, so get you out of here and get you home, and then just continue our conversation around some of the other possibilities. And again, I'm just kind of really wanting to gauge your interest in having staff dive deeper or not. So I want to thank Uber and Lyft for coming out this evening and sharing their services and some of their ideas, and hopefully we'll be able to look at maybe partnering with both of them in the future. Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Agreed. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
So maybe I'll just take a moment here, Council, to note that at the staff and mayor and deputy mayor level, we started into some of this conversation about even how to land this the other day, and we ended up consuming, I think, an hour talking about ideas and possibilities and where to go with it. What came out of that was less any answers and more a sense that this council is going to need a significant amount of time to become educated about the different possibilities and to try and figure out a path forward that makes sense. And that leads us pretty quickly into the question of where do we carve out the time to accomplish that, and is everybody in agreement that makes sense to do? First of all, I don't want to overstep, but does and then the thought I think Julie had was that it's perhaps not the planning session, but a separate chunk of time may be set aside in advance or close to in January, I guess is what you're thinking. But let me turn it over to you to share your thoughts.
Thank you, Mayor. Exactly. Immediately my thought was, gee, there are so many different ways to go about this. Obviously, we talked rideshare. We didn't even talk about carpooling or bike share programming and all that. There's so many more. There's microtransit I didn't even cover here. I mean, there's tons of things we could be doing. But how do you want to approach it? I know the council in the past has done council subcommittees. I know some of you know my concern about subcommittees, because I really commit to really keeping the full council informed. And so sometimes when you have council members going off to study an issue, it just sometimes doesn't always come back to the full council. That's my one concern. And so then we started talking about, well, should we just have more of these study sessions, whether it's on a different evening, a special meeting, and it really is just 3 hours just getting into this topic, diving a little bit more, inviting these experts in, inviting other partners, Metro in.
Metro is
exactly
would like to come in and talk to us about the other.
Would love to come talk to you. And so, how do you want to do this? And of course, another approach is if you prefer more of a community engagement approach, where you're wanting the community, some experts, of course we have them in our community, to come together, convene, do a study group, a blue ribbon panel of some sort, and really have them dive into the issue, study it, come up with findings and recommendations, and provide that. So you can really do this all kinds of ways. I think the key part I would want to stress is no matter which way you do it, whether it's you, the full council, I would want to make sure there are parts, we consider parts where we bring in the community and ask them to give you comments about the item. So we might do a special meeting, but in that case, carve out public comment so you hear some feedback about the item, and maybe you do it after the staff presentation, or you do, there are different ways you can do it. It's just, I do want the community's input, because obviously this is about providing services to them, and so having that input. But of course, I need the council direction first and foremost. So maybe it is better to start at that high level of how do you really want to go about doing this into the future.
And if I could, just before we come back to the council, you did have some thoughts about planning session, not planning session. You want to share that? So just
thank you. Yes, and so we talked about whether or not this should be carved out at your planning session in January. I think so the objectives for the council planning session, you have a new body, and so spending some time doing some team building in the sense of getting to know each other, getting to know how you communicate, what kinds of expectations you have. Reviewing the council's past work plan and saying, did we make progress here, did we not, and really going through an exercise of what do we keep, what do we drop, what do we change, what do we add. And that does take some time. And also, we'll have to carve out a little time to talk about the budget and our financial challenges, a little bit there, a little bit of time talking about roles and responsibilities, and I would love to carve out a little time talking about emerging issues. As you can see, with 7 council members, 14 leadership team members, that's a lot of topics and a lot of people, and so I'm not confident we really have the time to focus just on this. But it's your planning session, so that's my desire of what I would like to get out of the planning session is ultimately your guidance on your work plan for the next year or two. But of course, it's really up to you.
Okay, so council members, thoughts, questions, where do you want to go? Tom?
Over the last 3 or 4 years that I've been paying attention to the politics on the island, one of the and it's noted in the surveys too, but most of the feedback has been that there are transportation and parking issues, and this Lyft Uber solution kind of fits in both. Mm-hmm. My question is, has the council and or the city ever thought of getting together a community transportation subcommittee? Because we have logistics experts from Amazon here. We have, I mean, there are just so many brilliant people here, and I don't know that any of us, we might be pseudo-experts now on transportation, but there's a really great subset of experts on Mercer Island that we could probably tap into that could do a lot of the research and come back with a work plan or a recommendation that we might be able to leverage. And just, we have arts councils and stuff like that, but transportation and parking has been one of the core issues for so long. It just seems like there might be an opportunity, but I don't want to create more work on the staff either. So it's just a question or a thought more than anything else.
Well, and I think that ties to what you teed up as one of the possibilities. Some sort of a blue ribbon commission group to try and tackle the questions here. So it's out there as one of the options. Benson?
I certainly think that we should tap in and utilize the expertise that we have on the island. But I'm just thinking, as far as a process, it seems to me that it makes more sense, at least, to have these study sessions where we get a broader understanding of what is available. And I really like this presentation by Uber and Lyft, but I can certainly see, the materials that you provided were incredibly detailed. And so, I didn't read it. I glanced at it, but it was just too deep. Yeah, I know. It's just too deep. Hey, confession. But I think, having study sessions open to the public, of course, where we can sort of learn these things, but then maybe for the council to give direction that could actually provide, again, direction to this blue ribbon panel makes a lot more sense to me, so that they have sort of a direction as far as what they are to delve into, and then, basically we can go back and talk to the community in greater detail. But I think, council, I for one need to have a better understanding, broader understanding of some of these options that are available. That's my 2 cents.
Debbie, and then Dan.
So, yeah, I mean, this is big and meaty, and it's clearly bigger than any planning session or even any one extended session or, hour at council, et cetera. To me, one of the biggest questions is really, what is the scope of work that we're trying to adopt? Because today, let's keep in mind we heard from 2 vendors who address one last mile. Granted, it does touch on the parking, but it was presumably last mile solutions. It wasn't about anything other than Lyft or Uber. It wasn't about bikes. It wasn't about PEDs. It wasn't, anything else. So you realize when you multiply the number of subtopics you have within these relative buckets that we have within Sound Transit, we could be here years from now and not having made any decisions, and we know that there is a clock that's associated with the expenditures. One of the other pieces that I think is really important, and I've heard from people actually all over the island, very different demographics and perspectives, and that is an appreciation for the fact that the transit agreement, the funds are movable, meaning that we don't have to spend $240,000 on short-term parking. We don't have to spend $5.1 on traffic and safety enhancements, and making sure that we're actually having a dialogue about the extent to which we want to build to the problems we have today, or, maybe we want to emphasize more in the longer term, future transit and mobility issues that the community might be facing. So that's a long way of saying I feel like there's a lot of work that the council together with the community as a whole need to do to understand what's the shape of the box. Mm-hmm. What is it that what tools do we have, what problems are we trying to solve, which are urgent, because clearly, we want to make sure that there's certain problems that have come out of this change to I-90 that we're addressing before we bring in a blue ribbon commission of any sort, because we won't necessarily know what we're asking them to do. And I think it could be a chicken and an egg type problem. So, I would really advocate that be it staff together with council. I mean, I'm happy to share my ideas about how do we start up here and figure out what the shape of this animal is and how we want to tackle it? How do we want to take some bites? But I would be very concerned if we were to go into this and simply follow, the strategy to the definition of the buckets that we have in that agreement, because that wasn't the spirit in which it was negotiated, and I think we would be losing out on what might be mobility opportunities for generations to come.
Dan.
So, obviously, this won't be my decision to participate in, but I heard when Peter Strzok talked during public comment, where he used the phrase paralysis by analysis, and listening to some of the comments, I'm very concerned that he might have it hit the head right on the nail right on the head. Yeah, hit the head right on the nail right on the head. If you recall, for those who are on the council, when we put the 630 in place, 630 bus line, we didn't spend a lot of time analyzing that. We were dealing with a situation with Metro having reduced bus service, and Kirsten did a fair amount of work pulling that together, and we had some meetings, and it happened.
I'm smiling at Kirsten because we did do a lot of work on that over the course of months.
Well, but I mean, we did, but it wasn't the type of analysis that, I mean, yeah, we did. We had several meetings. I was in those meetings with you, but it was, and we had the woman from Metro who came in and spent a lot of time talking through things with us. But it was all, we got it done, and we knew that's what we were going to do, and it was just a question of putting it together. I think what Julie has presented to us tonight, is a commitment from 2 established companies to put some sort of pilot project together. And I would encourage the council, because it doesn't foreclose anything else you might want to do, to direct staff to come back to the council with a a completely worked out pilot project with both of these companies, and say, this is just a pilot project, and if it works, it's great. If it doesn't work, so be it. But at least you're moving forward. I mean, in the transportation workshop that Tom and Mark Cohn put together, there was a very interesting discussion by this company from Denver, I guess it was, on driverless cars. And I don't think we're ready for that yet, but a year from now, 2 years from now, I mean, they were prepared to, if I recall correctly, Tom, they were prepared to sit down with Julie and work out some sort of pilot project that might be possible in the future. But that's at least, I think, a year away from now. So there's some interesting ideas out there, but this is, I was really impressed with the willingness of Uber and Lyft to do pilot projects. I think if you can get them to commit to a 3-month pilot project, you can't lose by that. And then you're showing the community that you're willing to you're willing to help address a problem, just like we did with the 630. So I'd encourage you, instead of appointing your blue ribbon committee and talking about this for the next 6 months, direct staff to come back to you with a more worked out proposal for pilot projects, and then have your public hearings with the citizenry, get their input on it, but then with a view towards seeing if you can put that in place.
I'm just going to point out, I don't think it's an either or.
Right. No, it's not.
And I think that there's that which can be done quickly, and if the council agrees that it's something like this, but equally, I would be very remiss if we were to spend $9 million without having a plan.
Dave?
So completely agree with everything Dan said. And then to double down on what Debbie said, which is we need to I think we know what we're trying to accomplish, what our goal is, but we need to determine what success looks like. So I think given there is an enormous amount of work to be done with each of these buckets, I would like to make a plea to you, harken back to our last planning session, to bring ourselves up to the strategy level and let the staff come up with how the execution is going to look. I think if we start to get into what we have done, and frankly have had to do over the last 12 months, certainly, it will be very difficult for us to get to a point of success and agreement. So I would love to see us jump up, us as a group, up a level, and let them bring some of these solutions to us. And I think our job is to say success looks like this, to Debbie's point, and be able to articulate that super clearly, which I don't know that we have for any of the buckets, but maybe spend our time there and let them corral greatness, which we've just seen demonstrated tonight. Agree with Dan, let's just get going on some pilots, and there will be the next pilot. There's the bike share pilot and the carpool pilot and all of these things, and some of them are going to work and some of them are not. But I think our altitude will definitely determine the success and efficacy of what those execution items are.
I want to make a point of clarification. I wasn't suggesting getting a blue ribbon committee together. I was talking about a transportation committee, because we have a huge pie of issues, and one of the solutions is Lyft/Uber but that's a small piece of the pie. I wanted to look at this holistically, and like you're saying, Dave, I completely agree, focus on the strategy, but we need somebody that's going to actually get down into the details and drive the work to the work plan that you're talking about, Debbie. So I just, is it throwing us all in a room to figure out the solutions, or do we leverage the people in the community? And I don't want to slow down a pilot project. Dan's right. We have to start taking baby steps to a certain degree, but there's a much bigger transportation problem that we're working with that will take more resources, I think. So I'm saying I agree with you all, but I don't know that it's us that's going to be working it, and maybe we need to bring in the experts in the community. So I wouldn't call it a blue ribbon committee. I'd call it a transportation task force. That's a great word, a task force, because we do need some help.
Benson, then Wendy.
Actually, I think we're saying a lot of the same things. I mean, there's certain things, like the Route 630 that was done because we had an identifiable problem. And Metro, with their expertise and with Kirsten and other people's help, I mean, basically, we were able to identify that as a solution going forward. I think similarly with Lyft and Uber, we know that the first and last mile is a problem, and this is obviously one viable solution that I would agree. I mean, if they have a pilot program that they're ready to present to us, we should go ahead and take a hard look at it. But I also think in terms of strategy and, taking a higher look, I still think that we as a council need to have a basic understanding as to some of these other issues, some of these other options. And then from there you can direct and develop resources or utilize the community. But I still think on some of those other issues, I would still advocate that for this kind of more of a planning process. I'm not into slowing things down. I understand this paralysis by analysis, and I think the community certainly would like to see us get some things done. I think we can do that, but we also have to be kind of intentional in how we do it. But on these particular issues, Lyft and Uber, we know that the problem exists. This is a viable solution, or at least a possible solution that we should take a look at. So, again, I think we're sort of saying the same thing. We're talking about different issues, but I don't detect a lot of disagreement, frankly, as far as the urgency that we see on some of these issues.
All right, so I'll say that I do like the idea of a council subcommittee to sort of be a part of this task force with our resident experts. I can think of 5 and 6 people right now that I would want on that task force. The trick is they're all super busy, and we'd have to be really clear about what this task force is being asked to look at in terms of different buckets and when to pull the trigger on a pilot. After they kind of do the initial look at Uber, Lyft in this UW Innovation Center, right? There are a number of other different vendors we could look at. So I'd love to see staff pull together kind of, 3 or 4 options in each of the different buckets, give the task force very clear marching orders for a brief period of time for analysis, and then sort of a go on something that we could do quickly like the pilot. And then the parking garage, right? That parking bucket worries me. That's a bigger, longer-term, expensive thing. Or not, if we can solve our mobility with Lyft, Uber, ride shares, bike shares, whatever. So having this group sort of look at each of the pieces of the pie and also think about the big picture together and what may or may not evolve. I want to make sure we can get to the projects like a parking garage, if that's what's going to be, because that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money, which will take money out of the other buckets. Conversely, if we don't end up needing that, let's put it all in on this emerging technology around driverless vehicles or shared vehicles, and utilizing our experts, I think, is key in that, because we're not experts. We can go to a conference, we can hear a presentation, but these folks who do this day in and day out, I think we'd be really remiss if we didn't rely on their expertise, especially when they're clamoring to give it to us. So whatever that council subcommittee task force looks like, with a finite scope and a very clear timeline and very clear direction. And then as council members, I would hope we can trust each other that when you're on the task force, you can share with the rest of us or send us some memos, or you can make sure we all kind of get the end result of that sausage making. So some sort of hybrid of everything we've talked about that's super clear and super deliverable, and let's start spending that money.
So a couple observations from, I think it's to my turn, and we'll come back to you. So I support Dave's, let's get up to a higher level and talk about what our objectives are out of this. I think we've got to do that before we can direct, whether it be a subcommittee or a transportation committee or a blue ribbon committee or something else. To my mind, us setting, is this about moving people to transit during commute hours? Is this about moving people who don't have access to a car? Is this about some other set of objectives, and how many people move today and how many people would we hope to be able to move or park or these other things? So I think getting some of those high-level objectives in mind so that we understand where we're trying to go. I guess I wouldn't jump to a Lyft Uber. To my mind, it's Dave's, let's get the high-level picture figured out. It's then let's get whatever this group of smart people is to then evaluate all the different possibilities and say, let's go on this 1, 2, and 3. I wouldn't support going to a ongoing committee, which I think was sort of suggested, but something that has a tighter time frame and is trying to accomplish a set of goals. And then so I've sort of said I want this, and then I'm going to talk about a whole, and the whole is, and Julie, you've said this to me, and I think you need to say it to the rest of the council, we don't have a transportation expert on staff who does this. We have folks on staff who get figured out where pavement ought to go and how roads should work, and they're extremely good at that, but we don't have a transportation person per se. And Kirsten, who's been sort of wearing that hat, is going to leave us here for a few weeks, and so we're going to have whole in that respect for a while, even to the extent that she's been kind of plugging a hole for us. And Julie, it's not really your job either. You're supposed to be running the city, not doing Lyft, Uber sorting out. So why don't you talk for just a second about and I know we haven't had sort of a discussion about what we think the answer to that is, but I'd like to hear you just at least speak to it.
So obviously, clear council direction is the approved sound transit agreement. So that I've got my marching orders, and so I've been operating with that in mind, and obviously thinking, okay, I've got to bring stuff back to you, and so here I am talking to Lyft, Uber, UW, Innovation, Mobility Innovation Center, Metro, and I'm realizing, oh my gosh, I am playing transportation planner, and Kirsten's playing transportation planner, and we don't have one. I mean, I'm playing the hat, but I can tell you going forward, we really could use a transportation planner, i.e. project manager as well. And so someone who actually knows all the issues involved, obviously knows the academic aspects of it, knows GMA aspects of it. And the mayor's right. We've got great technical staff, but our city engineer, our assistant city engineer, I mean, they're here. I mean, you've got Patrick, he's dealing more on the development side of things and our utilities, and then you've got Ann, who's dealing with getting projects on the ground. They are not planners. And so we have a real gap. We have some planners, of course, in DSG, but their job is, managing customers. So we do have a void, and to an extent we're doing our best to fill it, and so it comes down to how do you want to address that going forward. We can do it the same way, but I can tell you it'll take longer. I'll get to it when I can get to it. And the problem is, because I know this is a priority for you, I do devote time to it, and then other things suffer. Leading the organization suffers, doing other aspects of your work plan suffers. So, and I know we're lean, we don't have a lot of resources. I'm very hesitant to even ask for resources. So I think it's just a conversation we have to have a conversation about. So I'm not sure what the answer is at the moment, but it's a issue we need to address.
So I think Dan was up next, and then let's go to Debbie and then Dave. Dan, you still want to go? You don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware. Bruce made the comment that Kirsten's going away for several weeks.
Knee surgery, right? Was that not supposed to be?
I was like,
Health Information Privacy and Portability Act from your HR.
Sorry about that.
So I mean,
you've been talking about it openly with me, so my apologies.
So I mean, Julie, you and I have had this discussion before
Yes.
about one way to
You've
deal
given
with
me
this
good
issue,
advice about that.
and I won't repeat it in public. So, but I still think there's a way that you can deal with that, and even using some sound transit money to address the problem. So, I think there's an opportunity there. I am. Bruce, you made the suggestion that, that you took off on Dave's comment about getting up to a more strategic level, and then we got back to this committee, and we're not going to implement pilot projects. I
hope I didn't say that.
But not immediately. That we're going to first determine strategy, and then we will give, after we've done that, whenever that happens, then we will give that direction to this committee, yet to be named, and ask them to make recommendations to us based upon the strategy that we've put together, and then they may or may not suggest an Uber or Lyft pilot project or a UW pilot or whatever pilot project. I guess I just don't understand what the reticence is to direct staff to already come forward with a more concrete proposal on a pilot project. I don't understand why the council feels like it needs the guidance from some people in the community who've already got other jobs and may or may not be able to actually provide you input for another 6 months before you do something. It just, I think staff has done a lot of work. I remember, the Uber idea was originally yours. You've been talking about this idea for a better part of a year now, and staff ran with, I think it was your idea, and came back to the council with these pilot projects, and with the possibility of pilot projects. I just would really encourage the if you want to do your strategy, that's fine. If you want to do your committee in the future, fine. But do something. Just have staff come back to you with these pilot projects and make a decision on them without waiting for 6 months to do it. So.
Dave, Debbie, I can't recall who was in the mix first.
Actually, Dan said what I was going to say. My greatest fear is that I think we share the greatest fear, which is we're going to run out of time. And so the more we can do, we're a bit building the airplane as it's rolling down the runway, which is not a super comfortable position to be in. But I think that as we are met with great innovative ideas like that, let's try them, and things will stick and things will not stick. But I think on this, all of these buckets of money, they're so complicated and there's so many things to know, and to Benson's point, it's going to take a lot to get educated, that I think if we try and default to what we often do, and usually it's a good thing, if we try and wait till it's all tied up with a bow under the Christmas tree, we may find ourselves out of time.
Debbie.
So I just want to reiterate from my own perspective that I'm not perceiving this process as sequential, meaning we can only do one thing in one phase. So first we set a strategy, and then we pick some projects, and then we go find people to do them, and somewhere in there we have some great community expertise come in. I think there's that which is big and substantive, which we have to address, and some of that is how we want to distribute this funding. But equally, there's going to be some, what I would consider some, whether you call them low-hanging fruit, which I think is what Mr. Struck referenced, or call them sort of the immediate and the obvious, it's going to be there. I certainly would support going back and working more with Lyft and Uber to understand this. But equally, I don't know what we're piloting. I don't know what we are testing for. But we can figure that out with them. They've got this experience. So I guess I would just encourage us to understand that there does have to be rhyme and reason to this, but it doesn't mean that we have to stop all engines at the same time. Now, with regard to the funding, this is sort of the challenge that we always face. And to the extent that we are able to use this fund, I guess Carrie is the one who's going to understand the intricacies of the contract, the extent to which we can use the fund, the $10 million, to, I don't know, a part-time transportation planner for a year. I'm just making it up at this point. It seems to me that would be a proposal that I, anyway, would want to understand, so that we're bringing in somebody who knows this, who lives this, who breathes this, and equally let city staff who have other jobs do their jobs. Because, and again, I'll make up a number, $50,000 to put into that, or $70,000 to ensure that we spend $10 million well, seems like a pretty good return to me. So, again, let's not over-academic it in terms of whether it's sequential or parallel or this or that. There's going to be some stuff that's obvious to do, and there's going to be some stuff that I really think that we need to be thoughtful about. And, I know, I apologize because I sense that it's going to land on Kirsten and Julie to figure out what all of us are saying tonight.
Well, in fact, I was just about to go there. I think we've thrown about as much as we've got at you for right now. I think it's, do you want us to try and seek clear direction, or do you want to just take a synthesis of all the mush that you've got and try and work it?
Can we start the process to get a pilot going with Uber and Lyft, just because that seems doable? We have the bucket. It's innovative. It would be really useful for the region to see if this works in our finite geography. I think we have an opportunity here to be leaders in this space and really demonstrate to our friends on the east side how this could work. So I say let's go with the pilot as soon as we can figure out those logistics and cost analysis and ride share dollar amounts. I don't want it to be free, but I don't want it to be $9 an hour for people at the south end. So let's go with the pilot and then figure the rest out as we go.
So how about we'll bring back some concrete proposals outlining how the program would work for you to take a look at. Let's do that.
But let me ask this. There's some. I asked both of them to give us their examples of other other pilots. I'd like us to see that before we decide on anything. I'd also suggest that we really would like to see more from Metro about what it is that they're developing, because they're developing a pilot project with Lyft and Uber right now. And I think we ought to have that information before we go off saying, okay, it's time for us to do something.
But it's kind of like what Deputy Mayor Berlin's saying, is these can be concurrent. We can do all these concurrently. Definitely.
If we do a pilot, though, I don't think it should be over the summer to start. Like, it should be a regular school year.
Okay, and then because we are running out of time, the one thing we do need some direction on, you might recall in the settlement agreement it says, well, we modified it to say by January 1st, we will identify short-term parking. Short-term meaning until the South Bellevue Park and Ride garage is complete. So that's roughly about a 5-year period. What we proposed, and this was with some help with Sound Transit, is their advice was go direct Sound Transit to go and try to find 30 stalls within that 1/3 mile or 1/4 mile walk shed, and to a do not exceed amount of $72,000
per year, right?
For the full term of that 5-year. $40 per stall per month kind of gets you at $72,000. So it's it's not a huge amount, but at least it's something. And I know Kirsten has been trying to find, just on our own, to see what the supply looks like out there. There's not a lot. So this, we thought, was a good idea to have you direct Sound Transit to go and try to scrounge up something. And at least that would satisfy the term in the contract. So that's one idea. Certainly want to get your direction on that tonight.
Yes, but when? It's mine. So this is back to the concept of a shuttle, right-of-way parking shuttle service concept, and whether that could provide a short-term as well as potentially a long-term, but and really starting out as a pilot concept.
It's just going to take time.
It's, yeah. Speaking to your microphone, but you're right. It's going to take time. And so I'm not quite sure where to go with that, other than,
So
to me it's intriguing, and it's one of those things we're going to want to flesh out, but I don't know how it meshes with what you're.
I think we need to articulate.
So I was going to say
the idea.
The mayor suggests, well, there's obviously we wouldn't put parking, we wouldn't pave over, parking parks or that sort of thing, but what else is out there? And it's right away. So it's identifying right-of-way areas in probably on the north end, I'm assuming, of the island, and really also, and then engaging with like a microtransit or metro to provide a shuttle that would operate in peak morning, peak afternoon times, and maybe even have the ability, almost like I'm thinking of long-term parking when you go to the airport. If you're getting in at 2 a.m., you can call and have someone pick you up. Probably wouldn't do 2 a.m., but I'm just suggesting that it would be kind of like that. And we could probably, I think, identify, several scores of parking stalls. I think that's just something, though, however, it will take some time because you want to understand the impacts of that parking on the right-of-way and, whether or not that's impacting neighborhoods and that sort of thing, and then also understand what the costs, operational costs would be. But it's a really creative idea, and it certainly would be faster to implement than, say, a parking facility. So is there council direction to have the staff go, and I'd get the engineering staff involved in this, of course, to start studying it and then outreach to Metro and see if they'd have interest.
Yeah. Tom, Benson, we got to figure out how to land this.
I wasn't expecting that we were going to get into this topic tonight, and I just found out about it tonight. So while I think the idea is very creative, I have significant reservations about turning Mercer Island streets into a parking lot, even for commuter parking. I think that one of the things about I-90 and the negotiations with I-90 that is really unfortunate is that those that were negotiating with us did not respect our community. So if we start going into right-of-way streets and adding parking strips all the way along the streets, and you can just figure out where the feeder pools are that come into I-90, especially those that live on the north end. Now, I'm willing to recuse myself from any discussion on this because I happen to live on the north end, but I will tell you that there will probably be significant backlash from within the community, not just on the north end, but on the south end too. The whole mission and vision, whether you go back to the 1994 or the current ones, is that people want less congestion. And the more cars that you put on the streets lining up to get to the park and ride, it's just optics. It's not what this community that I've heard from wants to see as a result. Now, parking garages and stuff like that, we can put it underground. We can look for solutions. I think it's a really creative idea, but it's not one that I personally would want to direct staff to look at right now.
Benson?
Just a couple of things. I'm in favor of having staff take a look at it. I think it's just to flush it out. I mean, obviously, the council would have to come back to the council for any kind of final decision, and by that time, I'm sure we will hear from the community. But right now, it's just more of a concept, more of an idea. I guess the other question or comment I have is, this January, is it a hard deadline that you're trying to satisfy, or can that deadline be extended?
It's aspirational. It's aspirational in terms of that's how the agreement is phrased. It was aspirational in August. We didn't make it, so when we took a little bit longer than expected to finalize it, we pushed it to January thinking we could make that. We are aiming to be as close to that time as we can, but it's not a hard deadline.
And I don't recall. I thought Sound Transit was supposed to be the one that would identify the parking spaces. It was the city?
That was contemplated. Your memory's correct. So we were going to enlist their help obtaining short-term stalls, and we can still do that. We were looking for direction from the council about how you want to proceed.
Okay, so
Can I rephrase just so we make sure that we know what question it is we're answering? So the proposal is to whether or not to direct Sound Transit to spend up to X amount of money, potentially $72,000, to secure up to 30 spots until the time that the Bellevue Park and Ride garage is open, which is estimated to be 5 years. So the question is not whether or not we're going to do it. The question is whether or not we're going to give staff direction to go have the conversation with Sound Transit. Assuming that Sound Transit does or does not find any parking stalls, it would still come back to us for a yay or nay. Am I getting it right?
Well,
or do you then, if you find them, you just go ahead?
We find them, we just go ahead, or something 30 or less.
Okay. So in other words, the group, the council would have to be ready to say up to, and I'm going to just use these numbers because this is what staff provided, 30 spots, up to 5-ish years, $40 per month, which equates to not more than $72,000 over the course of the agreement or contract or whatever. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's just ask that question then. Is there council support for that? Because I think what I'm hearing is that there is. Yeah. So, yes.
Is there a majority?
Yeah. So
Okay. Thank you.
Julie, Kirsten, you'll be able to mush together everything else to try and get to enough direction from council
Yes.
to move forward. Okay. And what I'm imagining we will do is have Metro at our first January meetings, what we've talked about doing
Absolutely.
as a study session.
A study session, just like this, invite them up. Okay. Do that.
All right, let's take a break, 10 minutes, and we'll come back 9:40. Sound okay? Okay. Meeting will return to order. We move now to Agenda Bill 5368, 2018 Legislative Priorities. Kirsten Taylor.
All right, thank you. So a little about the upcoming 2018 state legislative session, or why are we establishing city priorities. The city's legislative priorities are a guide for work with our area legislators for the coming session. They do allow the city to respond quickly and efficiently to issues of interest, and it allows the city to respond to requests for endorsement letters or opportunities to advocate that you know the full council has already agreed on these priorities. So the 2018 state legislative session is a short session. It begins on January 8th. It's expected to focus on cleanup work from the 2017 session. At last week's legislative dinner, our legislators, Representative Cliburn and Sen, did say that there's not an expectation that a lot of new legislation will be introduced. They're looking at legislation that the legislators have already been briefed on, bills that perhaps did not quite make it all the way through but might be reintroduced this year. So that is what we should expect that they are going to be focused on in this short session. And it isn't anticipated that it will end on time after 60 days. So I was going to provide an end-of-year update. It was in your council agenda packet. Just what happened with the 2017 priorities. So it is a part of the record. You can look at that, but I'm not going to go over every detail now of all the letters that were signed on or the success that was had around your priorities. It is a part of the record, and we'll just go straight ahead to the 2018 proposed priorities, and you can give your input. I also have the AWC's priorities. One of your documents in last week's packet was the outcomes for the AWC 2017 priorities. I would like to note that often we do look to other regional organizations that we are a part of, such as the Association of Washington Cities, Sound City Association. We look at King County behavioral health priorities. The WSSDA is the education legislative priorities, and then the K4C environmental health legislative priorities as guides or suggestions for you to consider for the city's priorities. So we have 7 priorities for you to consider for 2018, and the first one is to improve I-90 access and reduce impacts to local streets. And I'll go ahead and read it because you will be approving all the language. So this would be to request the state legislature to, 1, require that the Washington State Department of Transportation maintain Mercer Island traffic safety and mobility by implementing improvements to I-90 access ramps in 2018, and 2, create a path to new timed HOV access and potential hot ramp designations for the Island Crestway on and off ramps, and 3, find solutions to the I-90 I-405 interchange. So I would be happy to just take any comments you have or any direction one at a time as we go through. If you say you're okay with this, we'll move on to the next one. If you want to propose any language changes or give any input, you can do so now.
Anyone? Tom?
Have we as a council decided that we're not going to, or that we're going to give up the fight for SOV access? Is that done?
It's not a question for WashDOT.
So, because it's all federal highway.
It's not a question for the state legislature.
So because it's for the Federal Highway Administration, that's being partitioned out, and that's why it's not in here. Okay. All right. And then thank you for adding the I-90-405 interchange in there. I got caught in that again the other day.
Try again. Thumbs up on this? Okay. I see enough.
Okay. So the second proposed priority is to fully fund education. And that would be to request the state legislature to, 1, adopt policies and a budget that will address remaining funding issues as outlined in the Washington State School Directors Association, WSSDA, 2018 legislative priorities. And 2, rebalance the funding mechanisms responding to the McCleary ruling to provide relief to districts with higher property valuations. And 3, support mental health counseling and social emotional learning in all schools.
Okay, I know, Debbie, you had something on this one, so you want to go?
Yeah, it's actually hopefully a fairly straightforward amendment, and my apologies for not providing it in writing up front. Basically, at the beginning of the sentence starting request state legislature to, it would be, the beginning of the sentence would be, in conjunction with the Mercer Island School Board, request state legislature to, ... My intent here is to make sure that this isn't something that the City Council is pursuing independently, but this is something that we are following the lead of our school board on, as arguably this would be a priority that they would be far more intimate with than we would. So it's just simply calling out the partnership and the appreciation for the school board's priorities. So that's a suggested amendment.
So one comment I would like to add is that when we checked in with the school district about what they had approved and what they would like to recommend to the council, they stayed with the WSSDA 2018 legislative priorities. So I think their focus was limited to that. We do have an additional item that we are calling out in especially number 3, supporting mental health counseling and social emotional learning in all schools. It's not that I think that they would not agree with that. It's just what they have officially approved is this is the first item.
Okay, so I can further amend then.
Okay.
So if people bear with me, I'll go ahead and read it. In conjunction with the Mercer Island School Board, request state legislature to, and then complete point number 1. Now, question to you, point number 2, which is rebalance the funding mechanisms. Is that also something that the school board is supporting, or not so explicitly?
Not as explicitly.
Okay, so then it would be full stop after legislative priorities, and then it would be, in addition, request the state legislature to rebalance the funding mechanisms responding to the McCleary ruling, ... and 3, support mental health counseling, ... So that there would be 2 sentences within this point. The first one would call out in conjunction with the Mercer Island School Board. The second one would highlight that it's simply the council's.
Council members
Makes sense?
okay with that? Kirsten, I think you were nodding that it made sense to you. Okay.
Yep.
I don't know. Are we taking a formal vote here? I mean, it looks like the majority.
Yeah, this is.
Okay, so.
Yeah, this is not, doesn't have the formality of being an ordinance or any of those things, so we're giving direction to staff to finalize this.
And Councilmember Acker, what we anticipate doing is coming back with a finalized set of priorities that you will then vote on at the January 9th council meeting. So my hope is that we have specific enough direction to be able to bring them back where they don't need any more work.
So I don't want to be a naysayer, but I just, and we can talk about this later since this is notional direction for a future discussion, but I think we have a lot on our plate, and this fully fund education, I would kind of look to like what Debbie was poking at. This is like a school district issue, and I need to understand, and I'm coming up to speed, what our role is with these legislative priorities. So I guess in theory it sounds great, but I really look to the school board to kind of drive these kind of things. So, so I guess talk more about it later. So,
I don't think we're expecting there's another opportunity within the context of setting the legislative agenda to have a further conversation about it. We can certainly talk more about it later, but it would. I think the scheduling intent has been that we finalize these tonight, such that they're written up and we vote on them at the next meeting. So what I would suggest you do is, if you would like to see them changed, now's your opportunity to suggest that change. And I know it's short notice for you since you're just coming in, but
Yeah, I guess we're just handing a list of, hey, we Mercer Island feel this is important, hand it over to Judy and company, and then they can say, cities like Mercer Island support this. Is that what this is being used for?
yes. Yeah, just as they get input from every organization under the sun, asking them to follow that organization's priorities, we're making sure that, we're attempting to make sure that they're aware of the city's concerns and interests.
Well, I'd say, though, it does go a little bit beyond that, because there's been instances where the city has been asked to sign on to certain letters. So the first, if I understand correctly, the process is, does that priority, such as potentially an environmental issue, fall within the city's legislative priorities? If yes, then it's more perfunctory for the council to go ahead and approve for the mayor to sign. If not, then that letter would come back to council. So it is primarily for the state legislature, but equally, I think this has been very helpful in providing general guidance in terms of what our broader priorities are. So I wouldn't want that to get missed.
Okay. I'm just thinking about number 2 there, because this is what I pointed out to Judy and Tana when they were here, that the funding mechanisms are disproportionately going after property taxes, whether it's Sound Transit 3 or the McCleary decision for the funding of education. All of those taxes are starting to add up. So the rebalancing and funding mechanisms, that is specific to, I think we use different language. I think when Tana and people were here, look at alternative means specifically other than increasing property taxes for funding. But I'm going
But this is, that's exactly what this says, is deal with the fact that districts like ours are being inordinately taxed.
Yeah.
I think that's hidden.
I remember that issue being raised. I think it's probably number 4.
Microphone, please.
I'm sorry. I remember that issue being raised, and I think your comments, I remember them, and that's one of the reasons why I'm suggesting a change in item number 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm good with it.
Okay, so, yes, please. Okay, so we're, Kirsten, good with that, as Debbie changed it.
Yes.
But Dan's suggesting we go slow on this, so.
No more topic worth to end up on the legislative priorities.
So the third priority for you to consider is to allocate recreation transportation funding for Aubrey Davis Park Master Plan. And I'm going to move ahead. Councilmember Wong did suggest an addition to this, and I've got it highlighted in a different color and italics so that you can consider his suggestion, which is to include state funding of at least $200,000 for Aubrey Davis Park Master Planning Project to ensure the completion of master planning work for this important regional pedestrian and bicycle corridor. Councilmember Wong suggested adding much of which is located on WSDOT-owned land. And then carrying on as an alternative, provide funding of $100,000 and direct WSDOT staff to provide technical staffing review and services at no additional cost to the city.
So thumbs up on as amended.
As amended, absolutely.
Yes.
Good job, Benson.
Okay.
All right.
Got it.
Moving on.
Good, Dan?
So, number 4, again, you can see that there are proposed edits for address funding of city services. And this is stable tax revenues for local government are essential to providing quality, predictable services to the community. Benson is suggesting expand upon the different options available to local governments to raise revenue, including but not limited to replacing the annual 1% cap on property tax revenues with a growth limit whose maximum is inflation plus the rate of population growth. Retain state shared revenues, loosen restrictions on REIT 2 funds to more closely match REIT 1 funds, and remove technology and equipment restrictions on both.
Okay. Nope.
What is
Yep. So there's support, but go ahead.
Okay, so I agree with the changes to REIT, but I don't support the increase on the 1% cap. It feels like it's a good mechanism for governance that every time we have to go above and beyond, and I realize that given the growth of expenses is greater than our income, but every time we have to go above and beyond, I think it requires us as governments to be very explicit to the voters what we're going to ask them their dollars for. So I'm not in support of the 1% increase.
Okay.
Increasing the 1% cap, rather.
Okay.
I'm with Dave. After, just to quote Judy, that voters are going to hear a primal scream this next year on their taxes. I've been feeling that way for a while, and I can't support this one right now.
Okay. Supported by a majority, though, so onward.
Okay.
I'm trying to be respectful of Dan's let's get done.
All right.
And we clearly
So-
saw five
On his last meeting.
5 thumbs up on this. So.
We used to do like 1 o'clock in the morning in the good old days.
Number 5 is to enhance health and human services and address the housing and homelessness crisis. Support legislation to expand mental health prevention. 2, increase the purchase age for tobacco and vapor products from 18 to 21 via SHB 1047 or its equivalent. And 3, support health and human services to address the opioid crisis that also impacts the level of homelessness experienced as a direct result of opiate use disorder. And support legislation in favor of providing dedicated sources for the construction of affordable housing.
Passes.
All right. And number 6 is also one that there was a
Had to go to a small font to fit it on the page.
Yes. Preserve the environment. So this one it is lengthy. Support legislation and partner with other organizations to support the following. 1, support a statewide price on carbon pollution. 2, reduce transportation-related carbon emissions. 3, continue to support a clear, accelerated timeline for retirement of coal from Puget Sound Energy's portfolio. 4, support distributed solar energy generation. 5, support green building and energy efficiency, including the increase in the State Building Code Council fee from $4.50 to $10 per building permit to fund the work of the Building Code Council, which includes development of new building code and energy code. And 6, endorse sign-on letters that advocate for increasing clean energy or promoting environmental health measures. And 7, requests that the state legislature review the incentives for renewable electricity generated from wind and solar to encourage more investor funding community solar installations.
Okay.
7 priorities.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify? Can we just have a quick council conversation on this price on carbon, tax on carbon, price on carbon, whatever you want to call it? Judy and Tana, if you recall, talked about whether or not funds should be dedicated to addressing climate change or be used to offset other issues like human services or the primal screen property taxes. And I'd like to propose that this council consider dedicating those funds to climate change mitigation. We can clarify that point with some language to that effect if there's some interest, or at least a majority on the council that wants to propose that we support that policy.
So
Which point would that be in?
Yeah.
Or is it
it's
in
Number
the
1,
price on
it's
carbon.
the first one. So
Price on
we
carbon
heard
pollution.
it's likely to happen, right? So the question is, should those dollars go to address climate change, which is the whole point of preserving the environment, or should it go to offset ththese heinous property taxes that are coming, or some combination thereof? So
Okay.
really, Dan? Come on.
So,
Take that gift.
personally, I'll just give you a little bit of history. We've in the past talked about how to make a statement about carbon pollution. What we've at least done in the past is to say, let's just be agnostic about how they do it, whether it be cap and trade or whether it be tax. Let's just make the statement that we want some price on carbon. When there obviously are folks who have talked about a net zero tax where the dollars come in for carbon, they go back out to the constituents in one form. There are other scenarios like the one you're suggesting where the dollars come in and then are spent to sort of double the impact, right? You in the sense of having an impact on the price of carbon, but then also having an impact by building green infrastructure with the dollars. I think what you're suggesting is perfectly reasonable as an alternative, and I'd be very supportive of that as an option. Personally, though, I believe that the holy grail here is to get the price on carbon in the first place, and so I'm supportive of keeping the broader language, the less restrictive language, for that reason. So that's my feeling, but others feel free. Wade in. I'm not going to have heartburn if we.
So you're feeling
And you said it's likely to happen. I
Well,
don't
who
think they
knows?
quite said that. They said it's possible.
It's more
but,
likely than an income tax or capital gains tax.
more likely than it was before
Right.
the switch in the
So
legislature.
the question is, if you're going to
So-
raise the tax to preserve the environment, do you want the money to go towards that as well as by reducing the negative behaviors you want? I don't know. I'm in favor of dedicating the funding to the purpose and the problem you're trying to solve with the tax in the first place.
I see a lot of people who look tired around and non-committal one way or another.
I have time for
one more.
Yeah. Others?
What is that? Let's just vote yes on Wendy and
Yeah,
move on.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to support Wendy's. Really?
Yeah, I'll support it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going down on that one. All right.
Could you? Your parting gift to me.
I think that you got voted down by the environmental
You just really can.
Councilmember Riker, could you please restate
I think I
what
articulated my
what your
point.
proposal was?
She'll email you.
I'm sure, Kirsten, you come up with better language in the interim, but I scribbled out something like support a statewide price on carbon pollution if it's dedicated to climate change mitigation.
And have it dedicated.
And have it dedicated to climate change
Have the
mitigation.
funds dedicated to climate change.
Yeah.
And it's a guideline, right? It's not a
Right.
promise.
All right, we're okay with the rest of this
Yes.
with Benson's language in there?
Yes. Brilliantly done.
All right. On the whole, then, we're okay with this?
Yeah.
Okay, and number 7, support AWC and SCA legislative priorities. We've got
It's got 4.
4. Okay, and then Councilmember Wong had an additional.
This one's a winner.
You had an additional suggestion that because it was new and was not a part of this, I didn't actually write it down, but Councilmember Wong suggested adding a priority about passing the capital budget.
I'd like to see one of these legislative priorities actually add.
Okay.
No, are you guys being serious? Or?
Is it number 8?
They want to go home.
Pass the capital budget this
Take your
session.
victory.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I mean, we're all willing to say
You would think that they should. They should.
Okay.
we supported it more than
Kirsten?
All right.
Well
so
done.
staff will return on January 9th with a new updated priorities for council consideration, final review and adoption.
It was a task force, Dan.
That brings us to the conclusion of regular business. We move to other business. Council member absences. We have none this evening. Planning schedule to Julie, and you said let's talk about whether we're televising, and I think that's going to be a larger conversation than just this, but there you go.
You can't do televising if you have it in the community center, so you're forcing yourself back into this room for 2 days. So if you really want to do that, I mean, it's just from past experience, it's really not, it's hard enough to do it in the community center. To have some setup like this is just really, I think you're doing yourself, making a big mistake. This is just, it's more important you accomplish something. And remember that the rule of the planning session is you don't make any decisions. So that's always been the rule of the Planning Commission. Anything you decide there we'll eventually come back to you in an agenda bill, which will be publicized. But cut yourself a break and allow yourself to actually get something done rather than sitting in this room for 2 days, which will really be mind-numbing for you.
Well, we've historically recorded the meeting, so I assume it's not all or nothing situation. So there would be an option of
we record it. It's not a good recording. It's for me. It was for me to go back and get minutes. We did not record last year, I don't believe. Did we?
Yeah,
I can't remember. Okay. But it's just a little handheld, so you can't pick up everybody. But it was the point of it was for doing the notes.
Doing the notes versus the public to be able to really see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, can we get better audio recording equipment other than a hand?
It's in this room. I mean, that's what that's the decision. I mean, this room is equipped to record. So.
It just feels like there's a segment that wants to see it, so I think we can accomplish that by recording with our interim device and making that available to them after the fact. And it's not going to be ideal quality, but at least those folks who really, really, really want to see that 10 hours of work, they can watch that.
Can I just interject? We don't video record. We just audio record. And it's on a little handheld.
They could make it a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just seems like, and maybe I'm just oversimplifying it, but it seems like it's something that's easier to do than I'm feeling like it is. If you can get somebody to stand over there with a Facebook live stream, it goes live. I mean, I'm very respectful of the cost challenges, but there's got to be some technology, and I think we're missing the opportunity to. It's optics, you know. The last special meeting we had, what's his name, Ira up here, films the whole thing and puts it on YouTube, and he can get it done. So I just kind of feel like, why can't we get it done in a similar fashion? And that just takes a lot of angst out of the system. And if there is a cost,
well, we can get it done. You will just have to pay for it. So it's just a question of it's not something we paid for in the past, but it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's probably, within, I would say, probably under $2,000. But you're talking, if you want it recorded, and this is, I think when Allie and I did the numbers, we were 12 hours. You need to, and there are companies that do this, of course, have microphones, you'll have a couple cameras, and then they would certainly put it all together for us and make that available.
Totally get that, but couldn't we do a technology challenge to the Mercer Island High School AV Club and say, hey, can you guys figure out a way to streamline this for us in a cheaper way and open it up? I mean...
Let me offer that...
I don't know how to do that, so...
Let me offer my own, I guess, perspective on this, just to I don't know, just to wade into that. I was on the council, Dan was on the council, we were the only two on the council back when we started videoing these meetings, and there was debate about that, whether to shift over, spend the money, and do that. I supported it, and I think it was a great move. But I think what I've suggested here is that we talked about David said kind of 48 hours before this last meeting we should record it, and I think what we came back with, well, let's have a policy discussion about when are we recording, when are we not, rather than on a ad hoc basis saying, well, yeah, let's record this one or let's not record that one. My feeling is that, my personal sense, that meetings at which we're making decisions that we're already recording, where we're here, the sound equipment is here, the video equipment is here, yes, by all means, we should record, we should distribute via video those meetings. Meetings where we are intending a more informal setting, where we are not making decisions that are of a final nature, where we are intending that there be a brainstorming process going on, where we want people to be able to talk more openly and less formally about ideas and not get strung up for them in a way that then hamstrings the conversation and causes people to not want to be open with ideas. I think what we want to do is by all means the public should be able to attend those meetings. By all means the public can record if they want to record. We're keeping a recording of those meetings for the purposes of making sure that the minutes are accurate. But bringing the television cameras into those meetings, or putting those, even as Dan points out, putting those meetings in this room where it's got all the awkwardness of sitting around with the microphones at the tables, I think is counterproductive to the process that the council needs to go through to both team build and to brainstorm and to come to reasonable decisions going forward. So I get it that there's an optics question of how transparent are we. It's back to, Dan's made the point about transparency and how that we get flogged with that anytime anything happens that somebody doesn't like the answer to. But from my perspective, the information's all there. Come and attend if you want to watch that brainstorming session. But I would suggest that the policy statement be that all these formal meetings get videoed. All meetings of a more informal nature do not. That personal preference. Stop there. Been on my soapbox too long. Others?
Anybody else has anything? I have one more comment. I guess I look at the planning meeting as a formal meeting because it outlines the whole future of the year. And it really is an important meeting. And unfortunately, families and a lot of people are constrained on their time. So the only way that they get a chance to see or hear how we think is by viewing some of these more special meetings. So I think it does add value, and I completely understand where you're coming from, Bruce, and I understand. But I think that if the public understands how we formulate some of our decisions, there's less consternation when we get into these meetings and make the decisions. So it's just a thought process, and I think that anything that we can do to engage the public and reduce the tension in the system, it's a win-win. So that's just my thought.
I think the other question that sort of immediately sort of flows from this is logically the Planning Commission and the Design Commission are having meetings. They're having the meetings in this room. Do we want to go to the expense of having those meetings be videoed and available to the public? I mean, having a videographer here for those meetings, doing all the work of putting those together and getting them out. And so the answer isn't as simple as any one meeting. It's on a sliding scale that goes from a little bit to a lot. Same thing with public meetings that we have. We're meeting in the community center and we're talking to the public about topic of the day. Are we videoing those meetings and putting them out? So Christmas party, yeah. So
is there a way to just audio tape them pretty easily and cheaply, or just like the legislative discussion? We ended up putting that recording out.
Yeah, because we're in a room that has the system.
Yeah.
Can't really do that at the community center.
We'd have to rent microphones and everything. We can continue with the handheld recorder and make that what it is. But that's the solution I have without expending further dollars.
And I recall your meeting minutes were quite extensive.
They changed last year. They were different last year.
Yeah, they were more just really taking things that were flip charted, and writing those down, and they were more general because ultimately you all recall the draft work plan 2 times, similar to the legislative priorities. You're reviewing a draft, and then I come back for you to formally adopt that. So really at your planning sessions, it really is, to me, it really is a question of the format is intended to be different to get a different outcome. as the mayor said, I mean, it's really intended to be a lot more discussion-oriented. I mean, when you have to record something and you have to take turns, and more or less we do, but sometimes you're really in a very free-flowing conversation, and so it's just a different type of meeting, and you get a different type of outcome. I guess, again, I agree to a large extent with Councilmember Acker about exposing ourselves to more of the public. I totally agree with that. I love that idea, but I'm trying to weigh the balance of 12 hours of videotaping. I think to some extent not the most exciting meeting there is. I can't imagine watching a 12-hour meeting, but it's just kind of how do we weigh it all, and I think I guess my recommendation would be to continue with the practice that we have been doing. Obviously publicize, obviously make it open to the public, and again, making sure, as Councilmember Grouse said, you're not making any major decisions at these meetings. You're brainstorming, you're talking, and oftentimes, as you recall from last year, even like the goal-setting process is squishy. You kind of just sort of like which is great. You are at, thankfully, the 30,000-foot level, and you're giving me some general ideas, and you're thankfully not too into the weeds, and you're really trying to create a vision for a work plan. And then I work with the leadership team to come back, hopefully to put a little more meat on the bones and have you react to that. So it's really different. And so anyhow, I do respect that. I do want to make us more accessible to the public. I'm just really questioning, is this the right thing to make accessible? As Mayor Bassett said, a lot of land use decisions have just as much, if not more, impact on our residents than a 12-hour planning session with the council. So I would even argue maybe you should spend resources videotaping those meetings. But, of course, it costs money, and we don't have the money. But I would argue that is a more meaningful, probably, place to watch the dialogue for our residents than even your meetings.
Benson.
I get the concerns about the cost. That's a legitimate consideration. Also appreciate Councilmember Acker's stated concerns. And as far as the recording, we have between now and whatever it is, January, whatever, is it possible for you guys to at least look into types of audio equipment? It's a kind of a compromise, but if you guys can take a look at that, that might be something that's available as opposed to a video.
Yeah, not to get too 8 or 10-18 to talk about this. It does feel like there has got to be some technological solutions that are free, if not super cheap, that give us even a higher quality than we have. I know that we recently went through the upgrade, but I think there are some solutions that would be, one, higher quality, substantially lower cost, wouldn't require a person, and probably give us some portability. I don't know what those are. But there's someone that does know what those are, so it would be awesome if we could. It's not urgent, but I think if we could begin to poke around at that, would be awesome.
And that's largely why I wanted to, I know I surprised it on you today, but to bring it up, to say if there is that desire, then it gives me some time to go and research and find out what the options are and come back and discuss it before we actually set the planning session. So again, totally open. I just want some direction.
Let me try and see if I can slice this a little bit. Tom's asking for video.
Mm-hmm.
I think Benson was asking for better audio. Dave, where were you? Did you want video or audio? I'm just trying to.
I thought you wanted better audio.
I'm saying, in general, I think there is a better solution than we have today, and if over the next 90 days we can investigate a better audio-video recording solution, so whatever the policy decision is, we can deploy at zero cost or little cost wherever that venue happens to be.
So what do we do for the planning?
A planning session, it feels like audio would be, I think people were satisfied with the audio. I think because we haven't planned it, we don't have the additional funding to fix it for video, I think audio is a satisfactory solution.
Okay. So I would support, let's get a better recorder for audio. I think that it's not as intrusive as having the video present. So I'm siding with what now is 3 of us doing that, and Wendy's saying yes, and I think Tom was actually.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, but I also like the second part of what Dave was saying, and that's looking at a longer-term strategy, and that's what I was trying to infer earlier. And, you can make it fun. The AV club up at the high school used to be pretty techy, so, maybe you ask them to, as a side project, to give us a proposal. I don't know. I'm not in the technology field anymore, but I do like because I do watch these from home, or I used to. Now I have to be here, but I will tell you that even with the upgrades, it's not that great. So there's got to be something out here. If I can live stream,
it's so much better than it was.
It is.
But,
so I want to thank you guys. But if I can live stream to China and it can be clearer than what I'm getting in my neighborhood, I think there's got to be a solution out there. So I think.
Well,
yeah. So I like what Dave's proposal is.
I'm going to try to. Here's what I'm hearing is I think there's consensus for the planning session that we want better audio, the extent to which it's not a burdensome process or a burdensome expense. I'm also hearing that people are interested in understanding more broadly, maybe what I heard it was an element of portability, meaning physical. You could move some degree of recording, whether or not that's audio or audio and visual, in the event that we do want to record the CAG meetings. We do want to record XYZ. But equally, I'm hearing from Julie, and I agree, there's a bigger question, which is the extent to which we do want to bring, and I would identify in particular the planning and the design commission meetings to the public. And that comes at a cost, and whether or not this council would deem that to be a priority. So those are sort of the, I think, 3 pieces that I heard from this group. I don't know if I've accurately represented it, but I'd love to think that we're close to being done.
So just point out that having been at probably more planning commission meetings than anyone on this council, you will bore people to tears if you start recording, if you start broadcasting planning commission meetings. You will, but
I think you're bored by choice then.
it's just such a waste of time.
Okay. So I'm going to take that for the purpose of the planning session, I think we're on, let's do a little bit better job with the audio if we can, and maybe muddle forward from there. And if you want to make this conversation happen in greater detail at the planning session or at a later date, then bring it to us.
About the planning session, do we put times that we're talking about different topics too, so people can drop in
We
when
do.
they know we're going to talk about XYZ?
But it's touchy because sometimes the topic goes
Yeah.
short or a person's not available, and you end up you want to bump things around to be efficient with everybody's time, but at the same time you want to be respectful of people who might want to come in and watch. So
Right.
We do.
It's
We try. Yeah, we do that as a guidepost.
yeah. Okay. Julie, so I sort of went directly to that with planning schedule. Do you want to talk about anything else with respect to
No, that I think that was really the one most noted. And then, of course, we have a whole month to figure out what to put on January 9th.
All right, let's.
I want to see legislative priorities.
The other thing on planning schedule, I guess, is council members. Where did we land on this? This is executive session to discuss city manager review. Because initially, and you were right, I think we had thought January, but Chris and Jim thought, no, let's get it done this month, and I think you were in favor of that as well, and I said, fine.
But I thought it went back to January 9th. That was something to schedule.
That's right. We did end up deciding we would do it.
Yes. Thank you. We will most likely schedule an executive session on the 9th to finalize that report. And then, I will be making my evaluation available on my webpage, on the website. It will be available to the public. So be careful what you put in there.
Very well. And then in terms of other planning, council members, you've all been contacted by Chris Siegel about participating in Julie's review. So I think at this point she said that was pretty well set. So I will see you over the next few days for that. Board appointments, none this evening. Council member reports. Benson, you want to start?
In the city manager's report, she mentioned that the Sustainable Mercer Island folks are meeting on December 11th. And it's actually going to be a pretty, the last meeting, council members Neese and I were there. So that's a really interesting group. But this up-and-coming meeting, if you can make it, it'd be great, because they're actually going to have somebody who's going to go in depth into the STAR certification process. That is probably going to come back to the council at some point. So it's just being an opportunity for folks to get more involved, or at least more knowledgeable about this STAR certification process. So anyway, I'm sorry, and the meeting again is from 6:30 to 8:30 at the community center.
Wendy.
I just want to say congratulations to the Mercer Island girls soccer team. They won the state championship. Super cool.
Tom?
I don't have any committees. I'm clear, so
okay.
Thank you.
Doesn't he get automatically to the disability committee?
Debbie?
So we had a GMPC meeting last week, and just reiterating how fortunate we are to have synonymous boundaries between the school district and the city. The discussion was school siting and some of the capacity issues that Issaquah, Lake Washington, and other school districts are having in terms of physically finding sites within the growth boundary to actually put these thousands of kids. So that was super helpful. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So I should clarify that remark, Tom. There used to be, and at least when I came on the council, there was a disability board. And it was set up, and I don't know what happened to it. You still have it? Yeah. Okay. But it used to be the newest person on the council automatically got put onto the disability board, just because it was such a fun position to have. But so that's what that was about. Actually, we had a regional policy committee meeting today, which was quite interesting, because the Sound Cities had put forward 2 proposals, which I had authored. And the 4 representatives from Sound City supported it. We had done one of them back at the November 15th meeting, and the full council then met afterwards. The full county council met and rejected it. So they came, under the county rules, they had to bounce back to the RPC again, and the RPC said, "No, we don't agree." So the SCA group said, "No, we still want to propose it." We made a small change that Claudia Balducci had suggested, and we got it passed, which I was quite, and actually the 3 county council members who had previously opposed it supported it. So
What was it?
Oh, you want to know the details? No, this was, the first one was a question of getting the county to look at the question of consolidating housing advisory boards and committees. Because the county has all these boards and committees out there which deal with housing issues. In fact, they just created another one yesterday, apparently, called the One Table Group, which is a joint announcer from the county and the city of Seattle and someone else. But so the county staff was specifically directed to figure out a way of trying to consolidate this stuff and get out the duplications that now exist in housing. So that was the first one. The second one was that the county had set up 3. On this new Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services levy, the county set up 3 advisory boards, one for veterans, one for seniors, one for human services. We had originally proposed today that they consolidate that into one board. That got turned down. But the second proposal was that since all 3 boards are dealing with housing, that we wanted to carve out the housing from the 3 existing boards and put that, just have representatives from all 3 boards into one group which would focus exclusively on housing. And amazingly, that passed today because Pete Van Reichbauer ended up supporting it. So it's going to be put into the governance plan for the Veterans and Human Service Veterans Levy. So it was exciting because SCA rarely gets anything approved. It really proposes anything, much less gets it approved. So it was sort of a nice thing. Suzette Cook and I, Suzette's the mayor of Kent. This was her last meeting, my last meeting there, and it was actually we both walked out together, and it was a nice feeling to get something actually done at the RPC level. So, and the last time, yeah.
Yeah.
No
Okay.
reports.
Nope. Back to me. No report other than thank you for letting me sit in this chair for the last 6 years. It's my last night doing that. So
Congratulations.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
could all vote
So-
you in and
Yeah.
say, you got it.
I'm not thinking that's going to happen. Okay, so with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.